FPS Win. Written by
嘟嘟雪球
Chapter 319. Outside the city of Clevorn, 3 LX570s were driving on a country road at a high speed of 60 kilometers. The villages on both sides of the road kept receding. In less than half an hour, the convoy had reached the deserted suburbs. This is the case with Java Island, or Indonesia. The cities are large, but once you leave the cities, it is really no different from some underdeveloped areas. There are no street lights, no human habitation, and certainly no cameras. This also gave Chen Chen sufficient conditions to organize his interrogation of Baslan. But how to get him to speak is actually a rather troublesome problem. After all, Baslan was not one of those drug dealers Chen Chen had met before. He had firm beliefs and was a serious player who was not afraid of death. You want to use physical pain to coerce him? Sorry, this guy started participating in Ashura when he was a child, torturing himself with a machete and chains, and the scars on his back are proof of his faith. You want to threaten my life? Why would he engage in JD activities and launch suicide attacks? He has long been waiting to prove his loyalty to Allah and then go to heaven to enjoy 72 virgins. Or, if you can't do it yourself, what about other people's lives? If he really cared, would he still do this? So, in short, the interrogation of extremists has always been a global problem. Not to mention the Northerners, even the Americans who deal with JD elements the most don't have many solutions. Their so-called enhanced interrogation plan is like a joke when facing these extremists. It has no deterrent effect at all. Waterboarding, electric shock, and even the later popular neurological interrogation techniques have all been proven to have very limited effects on JD elements. The only relatively effective method is long-term transformation and domestication. But Chen Chen doesn't have that much time. It is now 2:10 in the afternoon. He only has 2 hours to complete the interrogation. All he can use are the most extreme and violent means. He must be crazier and more perverted than Baslan in order to effectively deter him and make him confess information that is useful to the Dongfeng Corps after weighing the pros and cons. So Chen Chen quickly made arrangements, and the 2 LX570s left to look for things needed for the subsequent interrogation. He dragged Baslan off the car, squatted beside him, and asked in English, "Do you know who we are?" Baslan struggled to sit up and cursed in a painful voice. "Kaffir, you are lower than cattle and horses. You will go to hell. You will be in hell. I can create a hell of fire for you right now. Do you want to try it?" Chen Chen interrupted him and continued, "I am a Kaffir. I don't believe in your religion, so you don't need to curse me with your religious teachings. We are all smart people. You can't possibly not know why I found you. Next, I hope you can talk to me in a smart way, okay?" Baslan still stared at Chen Chen with vicious eyes and seemed to have made up his mind not to speak anymore. Chen Chen did not waste time talking to him. Instead, he looked directly at Li Bang and the short man who had been waiting on the side and asked them to pin Baslan to the ground. Then, Chen Chen took out a fruit knife and continued, "Baslan, I know you. In 2002, you had not officially joined JIS, but you had participated in JIS meetings, right? You know about the Bali thing, and you're excited about that thing because you feel like it's really revenge against your enemies. But have you ever thought that those who died in the explosion were all innocent people? They just happened to be on vacation in Bali. They didn't know the so-called political struggle that you care about, and they didn't care about how you survive. They were drinking and singing on the beach, and then nothing was left after the explosion. Of course you don't feel guilty. You always treat those Kaffirs like this. You hide it well, but your essence is a cruel butcher. So, you don't need to pretend with me. There's no need to make yourself look like a devout believer. You are just a businessman. You use human lives as bargaining chips, but what you do is despicable." "I didn't do it." Baslan stared at Chen Chen and continued, "I don't know what you were talking about. I know Bali, but those people have been arrested. I have nothing to do with them. If you want revenge, you have found the wrong person. Don't be so stubborn." Chen Chen smiled contemptuously, then pulled out the exquisite fruit knife, carefully cut a hole in Baslan's chest, and continued, "I don't need you to admit these things. The questions I want to ask you are simple. Is there anyone coming from Syria? What is their purpose here, and why are you attacking us? I don't know who you are." The severe pain made Baslan's face completely distorted, and he struggled frantically, but Li Bang and the short man held him down firmly, providing Chen Chen with a stable working surface. Chen Chen gently turned the knife in his hand and entered along the cut surface of the wound. The blade passed through the tiny gap between the dermis and subcutaneous fat, cutting off the densely distributed peripheral nerves and the blood vessels distributed in the dermis. Blood gushed out instantly. Chen Chen blew hard in an unprofessional manner, blowing the gushing blood aside. Then he gently rotated the blade, and a coin-sized piece of skin was cut off. "Alcohol." As Chen Chen spoke, someone immediately handed him some alcohol from the medical kit. Without stopping, Chen Chen unscrewed the lid and gently poured the alcohol onto the wound. "Ah!" Baslan cried out in pain. Chen Chen shook his head and continued to ask, "I ask again, why are people coming from Syria? Why are they targeting us? Don't tell me you don't know. I know you better than you know yourself. I have plenty of time. I can continue playing with you until you can't hold on any longer. How many cuts do you think I can make on you? Let me tell you, the highest level can cut 3,357 times, but I can't do that well. Maybe I can only cut a few hundred times. But I believe you can't afford these hundreds of dollars. How about it? Tell me, let's just pretend that what happened today never happened. I will let you go, and you can continue to do what you want to do. It has nothing to do with us. Don't cause unnecessary losses to yourself. Don't you want to do great things? How can you do great things if you die?" After hearing Chen Chen's words, Baslan's eyes showed a barely perceptible wavering. But he soon realized that the man in front of him was no ordinary enemy. They were ruthless and professional in their actions. If they were not Task Force 88, then they must be the name I had heard of before. In that case, I couldn't say anything. If I don't say it, there is still a glimmer of hope. If I say it, then I will be useless. So he gritted his teeth and replied, "I don't know. I don't know anything." "You're kidding. All your brothers in church carry guns." Chen Chen raised his knife and slashed it down. With the experience from the first time, he cut faster and harder this time. The second piece of flesh fell off, and the alcohol spilled out. Bazlan howled in pain, but Li Bang immediately stuffed the strip of cloth that he had just taken off back into his mouth. Chen Chen didn't intend to waste too much time with him, so he stopped asking questions and just focused on cutting the skin on his body. He tried his best to keep the wound smooth and avoid damaging the fat and muscle tissue below the dermis. After 12 cuts, Bazlan had already suffered a shock and fainted because of the severe pain that triggered his body's instinctive protective mechanism. Chen Chen stopped and used a bottle of cold water to wake Bazlan up, then asked, "Have you thought it through? You are not our target. Tell me what you know, and I will pretend that nothing happened. We have nothing to do with Task Force 88, and we have no interest in your shit." As he spoke, Chen Chen pinched Bazlan's mouth, picked up a piece of cut flesh and asked, "Say it or not?" Advertisement. Bazlan nodded in fear. Li Bang tore off the cloth on his mouth. He took 2 deep breaths and answered, "I really don't know who you are. I know there are people coming from Syria, but that has nothing to do with us. I haven't done what you think I have done, and I don't want to provoke you." Still being stubborn, Chen Chen frowned and stuffed the knife directly into Bazlan's mouth. He resisted violently, and Li Bang couldn't even control him. The blade cut a big gash in his mouth, but in the end, he still spat out the piece of flesh. "I don't know. I really don't know." Chen Chen could clearly feel that Bazlan's spirit was on the verge of collapse. But the problem is that a mental breakdown does not mean the collapse of his psychological defenses. In this situation, he may babble, beg for mercy, admit defeat, struggle, despair, or even seek death. But he would never go beyond his own beliefs and say things he did not want to say. The temperature is not high enough, but torture alone can only achieve this much. Chen Chen stood up and rested for a while. And at this moment, the 2 LX570s that had left had driven back. Chen Chen had a teasing smile on his face. He looked at Bazlan and said, "Even if you don't want to tell me, I won't kill you. Killing you is not much of a punishment for you. I have a better idea. Do you know what is the most commonly used substitute skin in burn skin grafting?" Bazlan's eyes suddenly turned into one of fear. He stared straight at Chen Chen, struggling harder than ever before. Li Bang punched him directly, while Chen Chen continued talking. "Yes, it's pig skin. Moreover, it was a pig skin that was skinned alive. I've already told you before, the last thing we lack is time. We don't have very good medical conditions, but do you think that's important? We will sew pig skin onto your body and replace all the skin on your body bit by bit. Maybe some of the skin will die, but I can do it slower. I will give you a large dose of antibiotics to ensure that you don't die from infection and rejection. Your new skin will merge with the pig skin. I just want to ask, if that's the case, can you still go to heaven?" Bazlan's eyes were red with anger, and Chen Chen suddenly felt happy when he saw his expression. Yes, this man is not afraid of anything, but he must be afraid that he can't go to heaven. Because in this way, everything he did would lose its meaning. Thinking of this, Chen Chen continued while the iron was hot. "Of course, surgery is not my only hobby. I am very familiar with your doctrines, to be more precise, the doctrines of what you call GIS. So, I have countless ways to target you. Finally, I will let a woman hold your hand and help you drink the poisonous wine that will relieve your pain." Well, isn't it a pretty happy ending? Bazlan's whole body began to tremble. For the first time, he felt that he was facing an extremely powerful enemy. Not because of his strength, but because of his madness. That's right, even Bazlan himself had felt Chen Chen's madness. He was extremely frightened because he was actually a coward by nature. His so-called ruthlessness, madness, and decisiveness were actually just the illusory results of his fanatical enthusiasm. When someone mercilessly and without any regard for politics correctly lifted the fig leaf of universal values cannot be touched and directly launched an attack on his beliefs, his pillar collapsed in an instant. Even Task Force 88 could only use normal means when targeting these people, because they have concerns and bottom lines. But the man in front of me really has no bottom line. He still wanted to argue and curse, but Chen Chen didn't give him the chance. The piglet stuffed in the trunk was pulled out. In front of Bazlan, Chen Chen asked Bao Qi to push the pig down, and then stabbed the piglet with a knife. "This is a nice piece of skin with tattoos. Maybe it's some kind of quarantine certificate. Maybe you'll go to heaven because of this quarantine certificate. How about it? Do you want to try it?" For a moment, Barence's terrified howling and the piglet's screams were heard together. A palm-sized piece of flesh was cut off, and Lin he handed Chen Chen an ordinary sewing kit that he had gotten from somewhere. There were no needles and thread for surgery, but this stuff was actually enough. Bazlan shook his head violently. Li Bang took off the cloth from his mouth. He finally shouted, I'll tell you. Half an hour later, Chen Chen got most of the information he wanted. It was not very detailed, and could even be said to be extremely crude, but Chen Chen knew that this was probably all Bazlan knew. After all, at this time, the power in Syria and Indonesia's JIS are still two relatively independent parts. They may cooperate, but the integration is not complete yet. Therefore, it is impossible for Bazlan to fully understand all the plans of the IS in Syria. However, the information he provided was actually crucial enough. That MPRI is really wild playing this trick on us. Their plan is definitely not that simple. Bringing these people from the Middle East just to deal with us is too outrageous. Sulawesi should only be their first stop. There are more things behind it. But now, we can only take it one step at a time. Hearing his words, Shirdekai nodded slightly and replied, It is indeed a bit excessive. This attack on us looks more like a harassment that they did while doing other things. But like you said, we can only take one step at a time. If they don't continue to attack, we won't be able to seize their weakness. Anyway, let's just ignore it for now, right? Then how do we deal with the situation here? Chen Chen let out a long sigh and replied, Of course, I will help him go to hell. Kill him and bury him together. The information Chen Chen got from Bazlan was actually very simple and could be summarized into only 3 points. First, the attack on the Dongfeng Corps was indeed related to the militants from the Syrian IS, and they were only the first batch. Above them, there was an unnamed command center. Chen Chen tentatively called it SAS to distinguish it from the JIS in Indonesia. Second, JIS has indeed been in contact with SAS and has a tendency to cause further trouble, but even Baslin does not know the specific plan. Third, SD's arrival in Indonesia is related to MPRI. They came as mercenaries, and their identities are completely legal. This is why Task Force 88 rejected Xiaoyu and others' further inquiries. This information is quite vague. It can even be said that even without Baslin, Chen Chen's own speculation alone can roughly sort out this process. However, there is a difference between speculation and evidence. Chen Chen has recorded all of Baslin's words. Although this cannot serve as ironclad evidence, it is enough for Xiaoyu or Bao Xiaomei to mobilize various relationships and solve the problems left by Kravagan. After burying Baslin's body, Chen Chen decisively led the team to retreat. There was still plenty of time at this time, so they were not in a hurry to rush to the airport. Instead, they contacted Bao Xiaomei and asked her if it was possible to properly deal with these cars. However, Bao Xiaomei's answer was no. The Bao family did have certain accumulation in Indonesia, but it was far from their status in Pubay. If it was near Jakarta, she would still have a way, but Reborn actually belongs to Surakarta, and they can't reach here at all. In desperation, Chen Chen could only drive the car further south. After passing Wanajiri, he found a secluded place and sank the car into the Gaja Munkul Reservoir. Also sunk in the water were the heavy bulletproof vests that were too cumbersome for them to carry on public transportation, but Chen Chen carried with him a pistol, ammunition, a thermal imager, and a small number of projectiles. This was mainly for safety reasons. After all, they didn't know Krivon's current situation, let alone whether they had been exposed. If someone really follows this route, I'll at least be able to fight back with a gun in my hand. Looking at the three cars gradually sinking to the bottom of the water, Yang Shu, who had not yet made any big money, could not help but sigh. Hundreds of thousands of dollars just gone. Once we tell the story back in Pubay, my former mercenary friends will probably stab me in the back and scold me. What a waste. Do we really have no other choice? Hearing his words, Chen Chen shook his head helplessly and replied, You feel bad, but you say it as if I don't feel bad at all. This is an almost new car, and it's gone. But we have no choice. These cars are too conspicuous. Even if we don't get rid of them now, we can't use them at all. We must cut off contact as much as possible and get rid of the car to ensure our own safety to the greatest extent possible. When it comes to saving your life, everything else is just a sideshow. But they had seen our car before, so there's not much point in getting rid of it. Yang Shu was still a little unwilling. Of course, this was just pure regret, just like some elders who know that something is inedible but still have to say a few words before throwing it away. This is not malice, it's just plain frugality. However, his words did point to a core issue, that is, the characteristics of these vehicles are quite obvious, and someone must have seen these vehicles near the crime scene, and someone must have linked these vehicles to the Dongfang Corps. Fortunately, at this point in 2010, Indonesia's vehicle management policy was still quite chaotic, and it was unlikely that they would be able to trace the three vehicles based on the license plates in a short period of time. As long as the vehicles could not be found and there was no evidence, it was basically safe. Therefore, Chen Chen did not explain too much to Yang Shu. After dealing with the vehicle and packing up the equipment, the group walked along the reservoir to the nearby town, took a taxi in the town, and returned to Reborn. The reservoir is nearly 40 kilometers away from Reborn in a straight line. It took more than an hour for everyone to reach Adi Sumarmo International Airport near Reborn. Along the way, they were not questioned at all. Before entering the airport, Chen Chen ordered everyone to discard all their equipment in the farmland near the airport, and then entered the airport completely as tourists. Although this airport is called International, it is actually very small, with only one runway and 8 aprons. At this time, a Bombardier Challenger 850 was parked on the apron of the airport. This aircraft was first launched in 2006 and should be said to be a relatively new medium-sized business jet. Chen Chen didn't know who the plane belonged to or where it came from, but luckily, after showing his passport, they didn't even have to go through a security check and successfully boarded the plane through the VIP channel. At 4:40 p.m., the plane took off early, and an hour later, Chen Chen and his party arrived at Sukarnahata International Airport. Chen Chen used his cell phone to contact Wang Qi, who had been waiting at the airport. Since they did not have any connecting tickets, they had to check in and go through security again after leaving the airport. At 6:10, they finally passed the final security check and met Wang Qi, who had been waiting for a long time. By this time had become more abundant. Done, Wang Qi asked. Now that it's been dealt with, I can fly to Sulawesi with peace of mind. Chen Chen answered in a relaxed manner, while Wang Qi's expression was extremely strange. Are you sure you can be at ease? Why do you ask? Chen Chen turned to Wang Qi warily, and the latter pointed to the big screen in the airport that was broadcasting the news and said, Look for yourself. You just went to Reborn today. You are not going to tell me that you didn't do this, are you? Chen Chen was stunned for a moment and turned his gaze to the direction of Wang Qi's finger. And what was reported on that big screen was the bloody incident that had occurred in the Riyadh Mosque in Reborn not long ago. The attack left 4 people dead, 2 seriously injured, and 1 missing. Among them, the missing person is Hassan Abu Baslan, a 56-year-old Muslim who was a longtime religious staff member of a mosque in Riyadh. According to the police, a total of 6 unregistered guns of different models were found at the crime scene, which may have belonged to the deceased person. In addition, the police claimed that all 4 victims were shot in the head, and the other 2 were seriously injured due to mechanical fracture of the cervical vertebrae. A survivor was found at the scene, who was the imam of the Riyadh Mosque and also the manager of the Riyadh cemetery. After reading the news, Chen Chen couldn't help scratching his head. He thought to himself that it seemed that the imam was just an ordinary person, and it was a good thing that he did not kill him. After all, if he was Baslin's accomplice, it would be impossible to find a gun at the scene. Advertisement, it was just a matter of one thought. Fortunately, his hands were not stained with the blood of innocent people. Reborn was completely confused. Baslin's disappearance caused a great uproar in this not-so-big city. Both above and below ground, a large number of people were looking for Baslin's whereabouts. Everyone knew that Baslin's disappearance was actually tied to death, but no one dared to confirm it until the real results came out. They still held on to a faint hope in their hearts, and the direct manifestation of this hope was a large-scale search of the city. Not only the police search, but also the search of the JD members around Baslan. This brought the order in Clevorn to the brink of being out of control, and the pressure faced by the police station was almost on the verge of exploding. All the police officers were in a panic. They were hurriedly delivering all kinds of information and clues, preparing all kinds of weapons, ready to suppress possible attacks and demonstrations. After all, everyone knew that there were traces of JD elements in Kravagan, and everyone also knew that this incident was likely related to JD elements. And if those people start to make trouble, it will definitely cause serious consequences that the city cannot bear. Who wouldn't be afraid? Therefore, chaos is inevitable, and panic is also inevitable. But in this panic atmosphere, there was a force inside the police station that always remained calm. That is Task Force 88. In fact, this so-called task force is not as special forces as many people think. The name 88 does not represent the number of personnel in the task force, but is a commemoration of the 88 victims in the Bali incident. It should be said that it is a large-scale special police force. Its organization is quite special. They are present in the police station of every important city. In a sense, they are the second law enforcement force alongside the local police station. However, their activities are not commanded by the local police station, but directly by the task force commander, or to be more blunt, directly under the command of the Diplomatic Security Bureau of the U.S. State Department. It is precisely because of this peculiar command system that this task force enjoys a transcendent position in various operations. At this time, Task Force 88 is located in Kravagan's office. Buck, the leader of the task force, sat at the long table with a relaxed demeanor. While looking at the latest intelligence feedback, he said, the perpetrators of this attack are very strong. They obviously used FN-57 pistols with 5.7mm caliber bullets. This thing is not common in Indonesia, and it is definitely not something that ordinary militants can afford. Moreover, their entire operation was quite professional. 2 vehicles created traffic accidents at both ends of the road to block the flow of people. Then the commandos launched an attack on the Riyadh Mosque. In just a few minutes, they completed a series of actions including killing and kidnapping. According to the feedback from the traffic police, the traffic jam near the mosque lasted no more than 5 minutes. If we want to take the person away within these 5 minutes, I'm afraid we can't do it without adequate preparation. Their purpose is very clear. They are targeting Baslan. But why is that? What's so special about this person? Hearing his words, the intelligence adjutant at the side raised his hand and replied, Baslan is a very suspicious person. We have previously suspected that he is related to several JD operations in the country, but we have never had sufficient evidence. This time, the discovery of illegal guns in the Riyadh Mosque has almost confirmed Baslan's guilt, and his connection with JS is an indisputable fact. The only thing I don't understand is who wants to capture him and what they want from Baslan. Maybe this is an internal fight among them? That's probably the best explanation I can think of. After he finished speaking, Buck shook his head and denied it. It can't be an internal fight. If it was an internal fight, they might as well just detonate the bomb in the Riyadh Mosque. Think about it. How could someone who could get an FN-57 not be able to get any explosives? This is totally illogical. These people don't want to kill Baslan. They want Baslan alive. And the value of being alive is either intelligence value or religious value. But it's clear that they're not after religious values. Otherwise, someone would have claimed responsibility by now. As for the intelligence, this is the only explanation. But if we want to know what intelligence they got, we may have to wait until the day they show up on their own initiative. We're not going to catch them? The adjutant asked doubtfully. In his opinion, as a professional anti-terrorist team, if someone committed a KBXJ-like crime in the jurisdiction, the first thing they had to do was obviously to fight back. But now, listening to the captain's tone, he doesn't seem to intend to intervene in this matter. Looking at the adjutant's expression, the captain shook his head and replied, Don't be ridiculous. Do you think this is something we can intervene in? A professional team that appeared out of nowhere inexplicably killed a suspected JD leader, but there was no evidence. Moreover, they killed him brazenly in broad daylight in a busy downtown area. In Indonesia, who in the world can do this kind of thing? The adjutant was stunned by his question. After hesitating for a long time, he asked tentatively, Is it our boss? That's good. Buck snorted coldly and continued. If it was really the headquarters or the security bureau that organized this operation without our permission, then I think it's very normal. But the problem is, you just heard the inquiry call from the headquarters. Even they don't know what happened. They even think it was us who did it. So, it is definitely impossible that the headquarters or the United States did this. Then guess who else it could be? Australia? Buck was almost choked by the adjutant's answer. After a long silence, he continued, Yes, it is Australia. Okay, let's not discuss this anymore. Let the police handle this mess. Until we receive further orders, we will just pretend that nothing happened. La Boda, Qingshan Industrial Park. In the general manager's office, Chen Chen sat leisurely on the sofa, drinking the West Lake Longjing tea that the female secretary of Qingshan Indonesia's general manager Zhang Yang had just poured for him. While listening to Zhang Yang's work arrangements that of course, there was no need to listen to this. Because his real employer is not Qingshan Group, but Xiaoyu, the organization represented by Xiaoyu. Everyone present knew that this was just a formality that had to be followed, so no one cared about Chen Chen's nonchalant attitude. Even Zhang Yang just wanted to finish reading the document in his hand as quickly as possible and then get to the point earlier. In fact, it took Chen Chen less than 20 minutes to reach Qingshan Park. But in these 20 minutes, Zhang Yang had received several pieces of news that made his head explode. And each of these pieces of news is related to the commander of the Dongfeng Corps, the nightmare of Pubei drug dealers, the executioners of the 4 major families, the real enemy of the Myanmar army, the uncrowned king of the Golden Triangle, the pioneer of counterinsurgency without a stance, the carbon nanotube gloves of the Northerners, that is, the man in front of him. The first piece of news was that the Dongfeng Corps shot and killed 4 members of the armed JD organization in the downtown area of Jakarta, and they were successfully arrested by the 88th Task Force. The second piece of news was that the suspected leader of the extremist organization, in Krival, was missing, and 6 members of the JD organization were either dead or injured. The third one is the latest news related to the flight that the Dongfeng Corps originally planned to take. The news said that a time explosive was found on the plane that was originally scheduled to fly from Sultan Hasanuddin International Airport to Laboda. If the Dongfeng Corps had not temporarily changed the flight plan, it is very likely that the explosive would have exploded as scheduled, blowing the 12 members of their team to pieces along with the plane. But fortunately, the people who wanted to create the explosion quickly weighed the pros and cons after they were sure that the Dongfeng Corps would not take the plane. Perhaps taking into account the possible international impact and the cost that did not match the benefits, they eventually reported the incident to the local police station as informants and removed the bomb on the plane with the cooperation of the explosion-proof and bomb disposal team. This has also led to a complete suspension of flights at Sultan Hasanuddin Airport. As of now, more than 10 flights have been delayed and thousands of passengers are stranded. What is the concept of this? The passenger flow at Sultan Hasanuddin Airport is actually not that large, but once this incident happened, it became national news. In addition to the 2 previous incidents, within just 3 days of the Dongfeng Corps arriving in Indonesia, they have already made 3 super large-scale big news in succession. What kind of team is it that can achieve such efficiency and have such courage? Zhang Yang didn't dare to think too much. In fact, he didn't want to get involved too much. Yes, Qingshan Group is indeed the frontline force of some big struggles now, but such big struggles are often limited to the business field. No matter how hard they struggle, no one will die. But once your Dongfeng Corps arrived, not to mention the deaths in Indonesia, the speed of 10 in 3 days is too fast, isn't it? Scared. Zhang Yang was really scared. However, he knew that there was no point in being afraid. If he did not use the Dongfeng Corps, his own safety would not be guaranteed. After all, once you've shot the arrow, there's no turning back. Once you're on this ship, you can never jump off halfway. You can only hope that the captain and the sailors can take you through the wind and waves all the way to the other side. With this in mind, Zhang Yang quickly read through the useless work arrangements and fulfilled his duties. Then, he waved to the secretary and Wang Qi to go out. After making sure the door was closed, he stood up respectfully and walked to Chen Chen, stretched out his hand to shake his hand and said, "Captain Chen, thank you for your hard work." Chen Chen shrank back at his address. He quickly stood up and answered, "Brother, don't yell. I'm not a leader. I'm just a PMC mercenary." I understand everything." Zhang Yang thought he had let the cat out of the bag and apologized repeatedly with a guilty look on his face, and then quickly explained, "It's like this, we have a certain cooperative relationship with the higher level department, so I also have the corresponding confidentiality level. As it involves some necessary intelligence, the higher authorities will inform us. For example, the background of the Dongfeng Corps is not a secret, but only I and a few other people in the group know about it. Specifically in Sulawesi, I am the only one. You can say that I am your first-line contact here. If there are any low-level tasks, you can communicate with me directly." "I really don't, not at all." Chen Chen firmly denied it, but his attitude made Zhang Yang more certain of his judgment. "No, you are talking nonsense. If you say no, then where did you get your guns?" Zhang Yang didn't even dare to guess who could have sent the guns directly to Jakarta. "The reason why you said no in front of me is because my level is not high enough. I understand. I totally understand. Not letting me get involved in things that I shouldn't be involved in is a protection for me." Thinking of this, Zhang Yang immediately changed his tone and said to Chen Chen, "I understand. I made a mistake. But I still say the same thing, Mr. Chen. Boss Chen, if you need anything, you can just tell me directly. I will do my best to mobilize all resources to meet your needs. If I can't do it, I will find a way to ask for help from my superiors. Of course, the problems facing Qingshan Group are still quite serious. Should we talk about them first?" Hearing his words, Chen Chen nodded slightly. Advertisement afterwards. The two of them sat down on the sofa at the same time, and Chen Chen said, "Let's start with the previous attack. Your power plant was attacked? What was the specific situation? Can you tell me more about it?" "No problem." Zhang Yang answered immediately, and then continued. "The attack on the power plant was not an isolated incident. If we want to explain the cause of this incident, we have to start with the issue of land occupation in Qingshan Industrial Park. When it comes to the land occupation issue, we have to start from what happened in 2006. Not long after, just as Chen Chen arrived at Qingshan Industrial Park and began to settle down and prepare for follow-up plans, on the other side, in the suburbs of Reborn, a team of pickup trucks had arrived at the previous interrogation site along the route of Dongfeng Group. The leader was a bearded man in a white robe. He had a stern expression and obvious anger radiated from his eyes. Standing next to him was a security guard with a gun. Judging from the unbridled actions of these people, their identities could never be as simple as ordinary Muslims. And this is indeed the case. These people were actually all members of JIS. After learning that the Riyadh Mosque had been attacked and Baslan was missing, the brothers in the organization almost went crazy. Anger filled the hearts of each of them, and they wanted to immediately launch a large-scale revenge to avenge their spiritual leader Baslan. However, in this radical mood, Ahmed Danis, the second-in-command, finally remained calm. He knew that at times like this, he could not act blindly, because the flaws exposed by blind actions may put the entire organization into an irretrievable situation. So, he did his best to suppress the calls for revenge within the organization and turned his focus to investigating the truth. And soon, they did make progress. Through a series of transactions, bribes, investigations, and even rewards, they found the trail of the Dongfeng Corps within 2 days and tracked down all the places they passed. Finally, they determined the location where the mysterious team disappeared. Right on the outskirts of Clevorn, right where they were now. The wheel tracks converged here, and there are traces of blood on the ground that have not been cleaned up. They should have conducted an interrogation here. It is very likely that our brother has gone to heaven. Hearing this, Danis nodded slowly, and then said, Look for other traces. They can't have taken Baslin away with them. If Baslin has died, his body is likely to be nearby. Found it. Before Danis finished speaking, someone shouted from a distance. Danis perked up and immediately walked over quickly. He had expected to see Baslin dying, or more pessimistically, his dead body. But in fact, all he saw was a small mound of earth. A small mound that obviously contained a dead body. Dig it up, Danis said in a deep voice. Soon, everyone took action. They dug the soft soil with their bare hands. As waves of stench came one after another, the situation inside this small grave was finally exposed to everyone. Danis' eyes were bloodshot. Baslin's body was indeed lying in the pit. Because of the high temperature and humidity, his naked body had long lost its human shape. The surrounding land was soaked with putrid corpse fluids, and maggots were burrowing in the soil. This horrifying scene even caused those in the team whose faith was not so strong to waver, and a thought flashed through their minds at the same time. Can such a death really lead to heaven? However, what made them tremble even more was something else. The second body in the pit. The carcass of a pig. Same corruption, same stench. The rotten flesh had already fused together, and maggots seeking protein and nutrients were crawling back and forth between the two corpses. They had no religious beliefs. This was the ultimate insult. Danis' rage reached its peak. He pointed at Baslin's body and said, dig him out. Find out who did it, kill them. Kill them. Chen Chen group, inside the Dongfeng Corps command room. Chen Chen drank tea, while frowning as he looked at the sordid information. From Zhangyang, Chen Chen finally understood the situation facing Qingshan Industrial Park. In fact, this industrial park is still in the construction stage so far. Although most of the infrastructure has been completed, it is far from being ready for production. One of the important reasons why the progress is so slow is the problem of land occupation. In the eyes of local people, the construction of Qingshan Industrial Park in Sulawesi is of symbolic significance. Although this place is vast and sparsely populated, and there is no one. Although if it were not for Qingshan Group, Laboda might not have developed for hundreds of years. Although Qingshan had already signed an agreement with the Indonesian government to hire local employees and create employment opportunities. But who cares? For these people, there is only one fact they see. You northerners have occupied our land and taken away the benefits that should have belonged to us. Coincidentally, the Qingshan Industrial Park project was officially launched in 2006. At that time, a world-renowned text message incident happened throughout Indonesia, which put this project at the center of controversy from the very beginning. Until now, protests and demonstrations by local opposition forces have not stopped. Even based on the ever-changing overall situation, the trend has become increasingly serious. Among the opposition forces, there are three most typical groups of people. One category is the mining practitioners, who are mainly local indigenous people and led by the Sulawesi Mining Association. Their demands are simple. That is, to ask the Qingshan Group to withdraw from Sulawesi and return the minerals that originally belonged to them. This kind of thing is basically no different from what happened in the coal mining process in the north before. After all, money is a motivating factor. For the sake of higher profits, they are willing to commit murder and arson, let alone relatively peaceful destruction. The second category is composed mainly of normal local religious forces who advocate opposing the invasion of inharmonious foreign capital and demanding the preservation of the original ecology of the local religious environment. Although this part sounds the scariest, it is actually the easiest to deal with because they often just ask for money in the name of religion. Paying them some protection fees is just a drop in the bucket for Qingshan Group. The third category that is really dangerous is the armed robbers headed by several illegal armed gangs and JD elements active in Sulawesi. Their purpose is very complicated. On the one hand, they want to continue their opposition to the north as always. And on the other hand, they try to obtain excessive profits from Qingshan Group. Their methods are extremely extreme, including kidnapping, extortion, sabotage, and even inciting workers to revolt and create mass incidents. Since the official start of construction of Qingshan Industrial Park in 2008, many similar incidents have occurred here, and they were eventually confirmed to be the work of JD elements. While Qingshan Group has been resisting pressure and insisting on building the industrial park, the frequency of such incidents has been increasing, and there has been a trend towards violent confrontation. Having sorted out this, Chen Chen could not help but let out a long sigh. He drank the last sip of tea in the cup. Sure Dekai, who was sitting opposite him, refilled his cup with water and asked, "How is it? Are you having any trouble?" Chen Chen nodded upon hearing this and replied, "It's mainly because they are too mixed and chaotic. It's the same problem again. The enemies we face are mixed, and we can't tell good from bad. When faced with an impact, it's difficult for us to figure out their camp in the first place. And if we don't understand the camp, we won't be able to decide how to fight and to what extent. This will restrict our ability to do things and affect our operational efficiency and decision-making accuracy. In short, it's very difficult to deal with." What exactly is going on? Shirdakai continued to ask. Chen Chen briefly explained the situation to him, then pushed the paper document to him and said, "You can take a look at it yourself and think about it, if there is any useful method." "Isn't this quite simple?" Shirdakai interrupted Chen Chen and said, "Of the three forces, we can only kill the last one, which is the extremist group. We don't need to hold back when dealing with them, and we don't need to have any concerns, because as long as we can prove that they're indeed extremists, no one will bother us even if we beat them to ashes. It's the same in Jakarta, and it's almost the same in Reborn. Until now, no one has bothered us, right? What's the word? Political correctness. As long as we are politically correct, we don't have to be timid. That being said, the most difficult thing is how to distinguish. After all, once an incident occurs, we have very little time to react." Chen Chen frowned and shook his head, but then Shirdakai spoke again. "We don't have to wait until something happens to figure it out. Why don't we take the initiative? If we destroy the third force, wouldn't the only ones left be the first two?" A series of question marks popped up in Chen Chen's head. He had to admit that Shirdakai's thinking was as conservative and direct as ever. Yes, if we could find the people and kill them all directly, then the whole of Sulawesi would be completely clean, right? However, the difference from Pubay is that in Sulawesi, JD elements do not have a fixed camp. They may look like ordinary businessmen, farmers, fishermen, or boatmen, and they will only turn into human bombs when God needs them. In this situation, you have no way to take the initiative to carry out the clearing mission. After all, they are not rebels, and the Dongfeng Corps has no law enforcement power. This is actually the biggest problem that exists in anti-terrorism missions. Looking around the world, no one can actually come up with a perfect solution to this problem. So Chen Chen denied it again. It's not feasible to do this. Not being able to find it is one problem, and how to implement it after finding it is another problem. We can't convict JD members for something that didn't happen, at least not here. The core paradox is that counterattack is delayed. If you want to achieve your goal, you must break this paradox. But since the beginning of the global anti-terrorism campaign, no one has succeeded in breaking this paradox, not even the Americans. Understood, Sure Dekai nodded thoughtfully and finally gave up his somewhat unrealistic idea. But of course, he was only giving up temporarily. In fact, his mind had already begun to constantly imagine what method should be used to catch all these JD elements in one fell swoop. Such thinking will definitely not produce any results in a short period of time. But he himself is very sure that there will be a perfect solution. After all, his captain had come up with such a perverted method as skin-sewing interrogation, so he couldn't fall behind. After determining the basic tasks, the Dongfeng Corps quickly entered into the work rhythm. The first thing they did was to meet with the existing security forces of Qingshan Industrial Park. In fact, the security of Qingshan Industrial Park is divided into two parts. The first part is the exclusive law enforcement team dispatched by the local police station, which is equivalent to the street police station in the north. These people are only responsible for solving the most basic problems, such as dealing with petty thefts by villagers, maintaining basic night patrols, handling fights in the area, and so on. In several previous incidents, the police did not play any role at all. In the end, it was the Qingshan group that used its connections, official pressure, and complex and covert means to finally resolve the problem. Advertisement, therefore, the meaning of their existence is just to declare jurisdiction. But when there are really things that need their management, they will become turtles. There's no way. It's really too much to expect them to risk their lives for a monthly salary equivalent to less than 200 Indonesian rupiah. Chen Chen saw that they had only completed the formal registration and filing as PMC and gone through the necessary procedures. In the future work, both parties will inevitably maintain a non-interfering relationship. After the filing was completed, Chen Chen convened all members of the security department of Qingshan Industrial Park through Wangqi to conduct a survey of this force. It has to be said that any department that can be named security department basically has some skills. There are 10 people in the entire security department, 8 of whom are retired personnel and 2 are technical security experts. Under the operation of Qingshan Group, they all have a gun license and can use different types of weapons. Theoretically, such a team could be directly sent out to fight, but the problem is that their actions are restricted by 2 factors. On the one hand, it is about authority. Due to the special nature of the team, their authority is limited to the factory area and the Qingshan Group's own area. Within this range, they have unlimited right to counterattack, but once they are out of this range, they are equivalent to civilians, cannot use guns at will, and have no law enforcement power. On the other hand, there is the issue of personnel attribut. After all, they are not professional PMCs, and their duties are not armed action, but security tasks. Therefore, the means they are willing to use most of the time tend to be deterrence and containment, rather than eradicating the problem completely like the Dongfeng Corps did. And it is precisely because of this attribute that they cannot fight side by side with the Dongfeng Corps. They can only serve as the last line of defense, and as a trump card to help Qingshan Group buy time for mediation and wait for official rescue from Indonesia after the Dongfeng Corps' complete defeat. To be honest, Chen Chen was quite disappointed with this attribute. He originally thought that the security department of Qingshan Group would be a team with a relatively high degree of freedom. If there was a chance, he even wanted to absorb all these people into the Dongfeng Corps after the matter was over. Unfortunately, after the first round of communication, he found that most people in the security department did not have this idea, that in their view, even if they left the army and joined the security department of a company, they were still established in a certain sense. However, the establishment cannot be exchanged for anything no matter how much money or benefits are gained. Chen Chen had no way to refute their ideas. After all, the end of the universe was to take the civil service exam. Even before he was reborn, he was still thinking about how to get into the system. Therefore, based on this situation, he had to make corresponding arrangements according to the characteristics of the team. Although some individuals in the security department expressed some dissatisfaction during the process, Chen Chen did not care, because he knew that prestige was gained through fighting. After 2 tough battles, the Dongfeng Corps would be able to establish itself here completely. A few minutes later, in the factory square, Li Bang, who was standing next to Chen Chen, couldn't help but sigh and said, "I'm so proud of you. I'm 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 so proud of you." It's a little different from what I thought. I thought they were a team similar to mercenaries. Chen Chen nodded slightly and replied, "In fact, I thought so at the beginning, but I have to say that Qingshan Group is still quite conservative. I just talked to Wang Qi. These people won't even shoot unless it's extremely necessary. Even if they do shoot, they won't kill directly. I can only say that this is a typical law enforcement habit in the north. I don't know who trained them like this. This custom is totally unsuitable for the situation in Indonesia, let alone in Sulawesi. No wonder CIU chose us as outsourced personnel. We have much more room for action." Indeed, but there is a problem. We are seriously short of staff now. With only 12 people and no access to the original security force, how can we possibly defend such a large park? This depends on Old Pig. As he spoke, Chen Chen walked towards the office. The deadline I set for him was only that long. Now several days have passed. You should give me some good news. Meanwhile, in the square, among the people from the security department who were still training, some looked in the direction where Chen Chen left. Then he turned to his colleague who was doing push-ups and asked, "Lao Su, what do you think of these new people?" "What?" The man named Lao Su took 2 breaths and stood up. wiping the sweat off his face as he asked back. That is combat effectiveness, professionalism, and so on. I heard that they came here to take over the overall security mission of our company. All subsequent security matters will be directly under their charge. We must cooperate with their actions and follow their instructions. I think this is quite outrageous. They're a mercenary company. In the final analysis, they're just a security service provider. As the second party, if they don't listen to us, should we listen to them? After he finished speaking, Lao Su uttered a disdainful "Ha" and replied. So I said, a conscript like you who has been in the army for 2 years has not learned the essence at all. You're just going through the motions. If you spend 12 years in the military like I did, you'll know what kind of characters these people are. I won't talk about his background or expertise. Just look at the leader, Chen Chen, who is full of blood and energy. You still want to compete with these people? If you have a big shot, just hold on to him. If you are dissatisfied with them or have any doubts about them, I think you have lost your brain. Hearing this, the 2-year conscript showed a surprised expression on his face, and then he continued to ask, you think so highly of them? What's the point of being so passionate? Why do I feel that what you say is so mysterious? Lao Su shook his head and replied, this is not a mysterious question. If you haven't seen it, you definitely don't know. Before I retired in 2007, I went to Yunnan with the team. At that time, a model team had just retired from the border and organized an exchange with us. Those people are also full of genuine blood and energy. I don't know how to describe this feeling to you. In short, you haven't been a soldier for long. If you were a soldier, you will know who to call the boss at a glance. Also, since we're talking about this, I'd also like to remind you to stop being so rude in front of them in the future. I don't have any complaints about you today. But if there is a next time, Director Wong, you don't need to do anything. I will personally slap you in the face. Although Chen Chen is in Indonesia, as he said, his base is still in Pubay. Therefore, the operation in Pubay will not be terminated, but will become larger in scale as the Dongfeng Corps launches its operations in Indonesia. The most obvious thing is that after PMC was officially established, Lao Zhu's recruitment plan became much smoother. After all, if you put an ad in the north recruiting mercenaries, most people would be wary. However, if you say that we are recruiting private force solution implementers who are responsible for providing the most professional security protection, threat elimination, target achievement, and other package solutions to our customers around the world, then everyone will think that this thing is quite reliable. And precisely because of this formal compliance shell, Lao Zhu's recruitment work went quite smoothly. When Chen Chen called him, even his tone of voice was somewhat excited. Captain, no boss. The plan is going smoothly. I already have 6 people here, and we have organized preliminary interviews. The situation is better than we thought. The average age of these people is only 30, and they are all elites. 2 said they had won places in martial arts competitions, 1 had made contributions, and the other 3 didn't have any honors, but their basic skills were very solid. I've tested them. They can easily score more than 90 rings on the 100-meter target, and about 80 rings on the 200-meter target. They are really strong. Moreover, their physical fitness is also quite good. Jackal has already built the obstacle course you requested, and all the tests show excellent levels. Boss, I don't think there's any need for any more adaptive training. What they lack now is actual combat. How about I send the people over first, and you can practice while fighting? After hearing what Lao Zhu said, Chen Chen couldn't help but hesitate. In fact, according to the original plan, he had intended to let these new recruits fight in Pubay now, take on some small tasks first, and help the Bao family fight against bulk chemical drug dealers. After all, Pubay is a novice village. Leveling up there and adapting to the battlefield will also be beneficial for the subsequent running in of the large team. But the problem is that he is really short of people now and really needs new forces. In this case, it seems feasible to practice while fighting. Perhaps the only problem is that the casualties in fighting JD elements and public security wars in Indonesia are likely to be higher than those in fighting militias and drug dealers in Pubay. If not handled properly, it can easily lead to a catastrophic collapse of morale. The old pig on the opposite side was still chattering on about the 6 new people he had found. Chen Chen himself was from the same team, and with the help of some fragmented information, he was able to basically piece together the life experiences of these people. They are all serious veterans, some of whom have been training and preparing for war for too long and are unable to adapt to normal social life. Such people are most suitable for fighting because they have a natural enthusiasm for battle. In Chen Chen's own words, they get excited when they smell the gun oil, and they feel like they are ascending to heaven when they smell the gunpowder. If that's the case, Chen Chen finally made a decision and said, arrange for them to get their passports as soon as possible and send them over. I'll ask the company to issue a job invitation letter, and you can use it to apply for a visa. By the way, if possible, try to set up an office in Yunnan, under the name of Huame Company. This company is responsible for liaison with the North. If you need to recruit people in the future, just send them over there. Clear. Lao Zhu answered immediately, and then Chen Chen took the opportunity to ask about the equipment preparation. Lao Zhu didn't understand this, so he handed the phone to Peng Shuqing, who happened to be nearby. Peng Shuqing's first words made Chen Chen feel relieved. The equipment that we planned to purchase in the early stage has basically been finalized. For tanks, we have found sources in Tanzania and Ethiopia. The prices are very suitable. The only difference is transportation. No matter where they are imported from, the tanks must be disassembled and transported as scrap, and the logistics difficulty in Ethiopia is lower than that in Tanzania. However, Ethiopia's customs management system is also stricter, or more accurately, the local authorities are more corrupt. This is quite difficult. We don't have anyone there, so all actions must be completed through a third party. They also have to take a cut in the middle. Boss, what do you say? Should we go through Tanzania or Ethiopia? Let's go, Effie. Chen Chen answered without hesitation. The situation in Ethiopia is indeed the same as what Peng Shuqing said. Local officials are corrupt, and the hidden costs are extremely high. But the problem is that the higher the hidden costs are, the greater the room for negotiation. What we are doing is arms trade, which is already unruly enough. Are you afraid that others will not follow the rules? The more unruly a place is, the more loopholes there are to exploit. Moreover, there is another very important point in choosing Ethiopia. That is, this country will be the focus of northern operations in the next decade or so. If Dongfeng Group can lay out its plans in advance and take this express train, its development will obviously be able to reach a higher level. I understand. Then I will leave Ethiopia. Oh, there's one more thing. Good news. What good news? Chen Chen asked doubtfully, and Peng Shuqing replied. The route to Tongyai has been opened. So fast. Yes, at least road transport is now open. Next, I will try to open up the route from Tongyai to Kayokfu. If all the relationships can be sorted out, then in the future, our goods can not only come in from Kayokfu, but also go out from Kayokfu. Aren't you short of equipment in Indonesia? We can deliver it directly from here. Shit, the logistics route is about to be opened. No, to open up the logistics route, the most important thing is not Pubay, but Indonesia. Only when the problem of importing from Indonesia is solved can it be considered a real problem. It seems that Dongfeng PMC has one more job to do in Indonesia. However, to achieve this, the Dongfeng Corps' status in Indonesia must be established quickly. At least we must gain the right to speak first before we have the capital to negotiate with the Indonesian authorities. And this point needs to be found from those JD elements. The train of thought becomes clear. Clean up Sulawesi first, and then drag the president down with it. Don't you want to fight JD elements, but you're also worried about the tail being too big to get rid of? Okay, I'll do this job for you. Chen Chen showed a satisfied smile, and then he said, you get ready, and I'll push forward in Indonesia at the same time. Give me a month. Once we have established a firm foothold in Sulawesi, the routes to both sides can basically be opened up. Peng Shuqing's route has not been opened up, but Xiaoyu's route has already been formed. Advertisement the day after arriving in Sulawesi. The equipment Chen Chen wanted was delivered on the cargo ship of Qingshan Group. Without any disguise, these equipments completed customs clearance and were delivered to Chen Chen like all other normal goods. In the Dongfeng Corps' own warehouse, Chen Chen dismantled the cargo boxes used for transportation, took out the items inside one by one, and checked them one by one. The 416 Hong Kong dollars is still brand new, and it's really good. We don't have the M82A1, but the L115A3 is okay. M249 and M240 yes. The sights are a bit lackluster. There's only an ACOG. I told them I wanted an M553 in tandem with an N/PVS14, but I guess they didn't get it. Let's just make do with it. The 4i night vision goggles are standard equipment, but the quality is so damn bad. Did you really buy it from eBay? The bulletproof vest is from the north. It's acceptable. Bullets. Penetrating incendiary bombs, yes. Thermal imaging binoculars, goggles, carrying gear, silencer, grenade, smoke bomb, flash bomb, the big crows have also been transported here. It seems that Peng Shuqing has communicated well with them. As boxes were unpacked one after another, Chen Chen also felt the pleasure of opening blind boxes. However, the first few larger cargo boxes did not bring him much of a surprise. After all the items were what he had specified they needed. After Chen Chen had sorted out all the sets of equipment, he suddenly realized that there were still several large boxes that had not been unpacked. At this time, the Dongfeng Corps had all the individual equipment it usually used. From bulletproof vests to guns and ammunition, from projectiles to carrying equipment, from night vision scopes to drones. Although there is not the heavy firepower of 2 barrels per person as before, in Indonesia, this set of equipment is completely sufficient to fight CQB security warfare. What was in the remaining boxes? Chen Chen couldn't help but look forward to it. He ordered everyone to open all the boxes and then looked at them one by one from left to right. When he saw the contents of the first box, he couldn't help but scream. What the hell, a curved gun? What the hell? Everyone gathered around quickly, and Chen Chen had already picked up the gun in the box and began to study it carefully. He was very familiar with CS/LW9. In fact, the so-called turning gun is certainly not achieved by swinging the gun, as described in some movies and TV series, but by using a mechanical structure and a variable periscope aiming system to achieve the angular deviation between the personnel's direction and the bullet's direction. Simply put, this is a right-angle gun with an aiming system. The user can hide behind a wall and stick the gun out of the wall to kill the target. This feature made Chen Chen always feel that the so-called curved gun is more appropriately called a probe gun, because this thing actually solves the problem of observing at an angle. What T-shaped turn? What L-shaped turn? I don't turn at all. I lean against a wall and shoot you with the muzzle of the gun. I have to say that this thing is quite rogue, but its flaws are also very obvious. That is, the only weapon that this system can carry is a pistol. If the enemy has protective equipment, it is still difficult to achieve a quick kill, but if you can't hit MPRI, it is perfect for hitting JD elements. Chen Chen briefly introduced the usage of this system to everyone, and Bao Qi couldn't help but hold it in his hand and gesture around. Chen Chen ignored him and continued to look at the second box. And what was in the box made him even more stunned. Miniature remote-controlled reconnaissance vehicle. No more than 30 centimeters in length, carrying an active infrared camera, variable track design, and no markings on the vehicle body. This thing is very similar to the XDS remote-controlled reconnaissance vehicle that Chen Chen had seen in his previous life, but it obviously did not reach the level of that vehicle's reconnaissance and attack capabilities. It was just a relatively simple prototype. However, even if it is a prototype, it is already quite sufficient. Chen Chen couldn't wait to take out the remote control car, installed the battery, and started testing. During this test, he also discovered several problems with this car. The working noise is a bit loud and is not suitable for stealth combat reconnaissance. The ability to overcome obstacles is just SOSO. Climbing a 20-centimeter threshold is very difficult, and climbing continuous stairs is an almost impossible task. After all, this thing can only be used for 2-dimensional reconnaissance tasks and cannot perform 3-dimensional reconnaissance. But no matter what, it's better to have something than nothing. With this thing, when you want to attack enemies in a building in the future, you can not only throw projectiles wildly and rush in, but also do something precise after completing the reconnaissance. Tactical options are greatly expanded and security is greatly improved. I have to say that Xiaoyu really put his heart into it. Of course, there's also a possibility that they use the Dongfeng Corps as guinea pigs to test the actual combat effectiveness of new weapons. After all, the technical difficulty of this thing is really not high. and only some practical functions need to be optimized. It is really reasonable to give it to the Eastern Legion for testing. Chen Chen put down the remote control car in his hand, and others couldn't wait to start playing. I have to say that men's passion for toys will never fade no matter how old they are. There was a buzz in the dormitory as Chen Chen opened the second to last box. This time, the contents were a bit disappointing. They were just 2 machine guns, disassembled Type 85 heavy machine guns. Useful, but no surprises. Chen Chen scratched his head and finally looked at the last box. But when the box was opened, everyone was stunned. He finally knew what the 2 heavy machine guns were used for because the last box contained 2 remote control machine gun stations. No, of course it can't be a remote controlled weapon station. The technical level of that thing is too high, and it is impossible for it to be given to Chen Chen no matter what. But the beggar's version of the remote controlled machine gun station is completely sufficient. The horizontal firing range is 360 degrees, and the vertical firing range is positive 75 and negative 45. There is no fire control radar, but it can be remotely controlled through a reflective sight plus video transmission. The existence of this thing can be said to have brought a whole new idea to Dongfeng Group's defense. What do anti-JD elements fear the most? Suicide attacks. But if I pull out a remote-controlled heavy machine gun fire point, how will you respond? Moreover, if there is a first batch, there must be a second batch. Xiaoyu's intention of sending this thing over has actually been made very clear. The Dongfeng Corps can let go and focus on external affairs. As for the problem of internal defense, it can be solved by equipment. How is it? Are you satisfied with your current equipment? In the office, Chen Chen was holding the phone in his hand, and the person on the other end of the phone was undoubtedly the big money sponsor of this trip to Indonesia, Xiaoyu. Hearing her question, Chen Chen laughed and replied, "You say you were satisfied, but actually I am not satisfied. After all, we don't have fuel-air explosive bombs or heavy weapons, and we haven't received the rifle grenades that they promised us before. But you have to say you are dissatisfied. Actually, it is not bad. After all, we have reconnaissance vehicles, drones, and remote control machine guns. The technology has been greatly improved. But to be honest, the more equipment you give me, the more confused I am about your ideas. Do you need us to protect the Qingshan Group and the base in Sulawesi? Or do you need us to completely replace Task Force 88? Have you thought of this yet?" Xiaoyu on the opposite side was a little surprised. She asked subconsciously, but soon realized the inappropriateness of her question. So, she changed her tone and said, "No matter from which angle, your mission is only to protect the safety of Qingshan Group. But you also know that the security threats faced by Qingshan Group are not just harassment of the industrial park and attacks on personnel and vehicles. Some socialists have no bottom line. They dare to do anything, such as poisoning, bombing, kidnapping, etc. They are capable of doing anything. In this case, it is reasonable for you to adopt a passive defensive strategy, but if you take the initiative, there will be no big problem. As for how far you will take the initiative, that depends on your ability and willingness." Understood. Chen Chen understood and nodded. Although Xiaoyu's words were vague, in fact, he had already made the other party's meaning clear. Protecting Qingshan Group is the first level. Combating JDism is the second level. To check and balance a certain force, this is the third level. As for what the fourth level is, she can't say it, and Chen Chen can't mention it either. They can only understand it in their hearts. I have to say that Xiaoyu's expectations for Chen Chen are really high. After all, with what happened in Pubei, she probably felt that Chen Chen was someone who could accomplish great things, so she hoped to use his power to integrate some resources and open up some paths. To achieve this, her support for Chen Chen can no longer be as weak as Pubei's. Fortunately, Indonesia is a relatively open place, and painting on this canvas is less difficult than in Pubei. So, the two of them hit it off immediately. Although neither of them mentioned any topics that were actually related to work, in fact, many things had already been determined in the silence that both parties knew. If this is the case, then our subsequent actions may be relatively radical. We just killed an important leader of the JIS. They have become our enemies. In the next period of time, I plan to sort out the JIS forces in Sulawesi and see if I can wipe them out in one fell swoop. I need your intelligence support in this regard. Should this be a problem? No problem. Xiaoyu answered decisively. But it's only between us. I don't want this intelligence to be used for any other purpose, nor do I want it to be leaked to any unrelated third party. Do you get me? Understood. When will you give me the first batch of intelligence? What do you need? I need information about all of Baslin's contacts. And I also need to know where these contacts are moving. If nothing else, if someone related to Baslin flew to Sulawesi and landed at Sultan Hasanuddin Airport, I would at least know in advance. No problem. We can set you up with a group to share information in real time. Hearing this, Chen Chen breathed a sigh of relief. The problem is basically solved. Then the next step is to launch an investigation in Sulawesi, according to the map, and prepare for the possible impact. At the same time, in the Makassar police station, in the office of the Makassar branch of Task Force 88, Buck, who had just flown in from Reborn, sat opposite Regional Chief Ali and said while drinking coffee, "This is really a big deal. Our work may be quite difficult in the coming period. It has now been basically confirmed that the 3 recent incidents involving JD elements are all related to the PMC called EW. I have received instructions from the headquarters. I am fully responsible for tracking and monitoring the other side's movements and being alert to possible subsequent conflicts. I hope you can support my work and provide me with the necessary assistance. At the same time, I also hope that we can communicate openly and honestly and abandon those stupid regional prejudices. I won't think that you are being hypocritical with the local JD elements, and you should not think that I am just a gilded guest who came here to gain experience. How can I support you?" Hearing his words, Ali nodded solemnly and replied, "Absolutely. JIS is our common enemy and our biggest enemy at this stage. Advertisement. I will never do anything stupid on this issue. However, if we want to cooperate, I must at least know one thing first. That is, who is our enemy?" "Jess, didn't I tell you?" Buck asked doubtfully, while Ali shook his head and explained, "I don't mean just, I mean EW. No. Please don't misunderstand. EW is not our enemy. Buck's face showed panic for a moment, but he quickly calmed down and said, I never said that EW is our enemy. They're just employees of a PMC. They have very different positions from us, but in a sense, they also share the same interests as us. At least that's the case for now. So, in the near term, our actions against them are mainly based on observation and surveillance. Don't be reckless and don't provoke them. They don't follow the rules. Honestly, I don't want to see you buried with the pigs. Hearing this, Ali's face showed a look of surprise. He asked subconsciously, buried with the pigs? What does that mean? Don't you know yet? That I have no idea. Buck smiled and shook his head, explaining to Ali. Based on the existing intelligence and evidence, it is very likely that the people from EW Company are the real murderers of Baslan's murder. They drove all the way from Jakarta to Krivorn in 7 hours and abducted Baslan from the Riyadh Cathedral. On the outskirts of Krivorn, they robbed, or rather forced, a piglet and cut off a piece of its skin. We speculated that they wanted to sew the pig's skin onto Baslan's body because a large piece of skin was missing from Baslan's body. Then, after getting the information they needed in this way, they executed Baslan and buried his body with the poor pig. How about it? Do you feel the horror of this team? I feel it. Ali nodded heavily and continued. But it's not because of the pigs, it's because of their terrible execution. Yes, that's the key. So, we should be thankful that they're not coming for us. No way. Are we still afraid of them? Ali asked back in surprise, and then said, I mean, even if we don't consider the official superiors, we still have, you know. Buck sneered and replied, Who? Who do you want to talk about? CIA? DSS? FBI? Or MPRI? Which is the one we have the closest contact with at the moment? Stop it. Do you think EW is some kind of PMC? Just so you know, they just broke through the entire Pubay, with just 20 or so people. The shadow army deployed by MPRI in Pubay was directly defeated. The CIA's safe house was ransacked, and the Americans have not yet organized a strong counterattack. EW is not a force on the same level as us. Of course, we are not afraid of them. I just say that we should not cause trouble when we shouldn't. Okay, there's no need to discuss this issue. Let's bang, bang, bang. However, before Buck could finish his words, there was a sudden knock on the office door. Then, an intelligence officer from Task Force 88 appeared at the door and said, It's an emergency. The Labada police station reported that a large number of people had gathered at the local Darul Jihad mosque, and several of them were armed. They seem to be preparing to attack Qingshan Industrial Park. Informants report that they are related to EM. Captain, should we? Look, here comes the opportunity. Buck turned to Ali again and said, Don't worry about anything. Let them make trouble. You can see for yourself how strong this EW mercenary group is. Compared to the foresight of the Makassar branch of the 88th Task Force, the Qingshan group and the Dongfeng Corps were still unaware of the upcoming riots. Chen Chen was testing the remote control machine gun, hoping to use these two pieces of unmanned equipment to set up a safe defense area. To achieve this, the remote control machine gun must be located far away from the core area of the factory, but in a position that can maximize control over the entire area. There are only 2 such locations near Qingshan Industrial Park. One is located on Polo Island on the north side of the industrial park, and the other is on the mine on the southwest side. Logically speaking, as long as remote control machine guns are deployed at these 2 locations, all routes of large-scale attacks can be blocked. Even if those JD elements can bypass surveillance, they can only approach the industrial park in a human way, and the impact will be limited. But the problem was that there were no available strongholds at these 2 locations, let alone the kind of inaccessible watchtowers that Chen Chen expected. So, Chen Chen could only find Zhang Yang and ask him to build towers, install power grids, and other defensive facilities specifically for the 2 machine guns. Zhang Yang naturally agreed to Chen Chen's reasonable request, but just as they began to discuss the details of the tower and the layout of the power grid, a voice that was very familiar to Chen Chen suddenly came from outside the office door. Bang, bang, bang. This was the sound of 5 or 6 rounds, or rather AK-47 gunfire, coming from a distance. He stood up suddenly, subconsciously picked up the 416 Hong Kong dollars with his right hand, stepped to the window, closed the curtains, and looked out vigilantly. There was nothing unusual. Even the workers moving around the factory looked completely used to it. Zhang Yang was startled by his action, so he quickly stood up and explained, It's normal to hear gunshots. Don't be too nervous. The police in Sulawesi are very weak, but religious conflicts are strong there, and shootings are common. Sometimes farmers in a county would burn dozens of houses when they fight. As long as it's not directed at us, it doesn't matter. Hearing Zhang Yang's words, Chen Chen nodded slightly, but he still didn't dare to completely relax his vigilance. Instead, he issued orders to the team members scattered at various posts in Qingshan Park through the radio. Number 3. Look for the location of the shooting in the direction of the gunshots and observe if there is anything unusual. Number 2. Release the drone for a temporary patrol. Number 5. Go up to the tower to assist Dakai and see if there is anything unusual in the nearby jungle. Number 1. Prepare the reserve forces and be ready to maneuver to meet the enemy at any time. Yang Shu, contact the security department and keep an eye on the people in the factory. If there is any abnormality, please handle it with the camera. Master Chuan, prepare the medical equipment. Clear. Everyone answered in turn, and Chen Chen waved to Zhang Yang, turned and walked towards the monitoring room next to the general manager's office. In the monitoring room, 2 large screens displayed images from hundreds of constantly rotating surveillance cameras. Chen Chen asked the security personnel in charge of monitoring to switch them around, and only after confirming that there were no abnormalities did he finally breathe a sigh of relief. Maybe I was just being overly sensitive. However, being sensitive to gunshots was a natural talent of mercenaries who lived on the edge of a knife. You know, even in Pubay, such unexplained gunshots were rarely heard. Looking at Chen Chen's expression, Zhang Yang felt both admiration and shame. You know, the security department that he formed is quite professional, but in terms of sensitivity to danger and actionability, it is indeed much worse than the Dongfeng Corps. After hearing the gunshots, the people under Wang Qi simply confirmed the distance and ignored it. But what about Chen Chen? They even flew the drone directly out. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but compliment him again. Boss Chen, I feel relieved with you here. There's a problem. However, before he could finish his words, Bao Chi's voice rang out in Chen Chen's headphones. A large number of people have gathered on the south side of the park at the Darul Jihad Mosque. I noticed armed men among the crowd, and they were moving northwards. It might be number 4 coming for us. Should we raise the alert? Upgrade alert? Chen Chen answered without hesitation. He no longer cared about Zhang Yang, who was standing beside him. He quickly ran out of the office building and rushed towards where Bao Chi was. Soon, from the images sent back by the drone, Chen Chen saw the so-called gathering of people at the Darul Jihad Mosque. The number of people was at least over 100, and at least 2 of them were seen to be holding guns. They moved very quickly, using pickup trucks and small motorcycles to advance along the ring road around the island. From the perspective of the drone, they looked like a swarm of locusts. At this time, they were still nearly 4 kilometers away from Qingshan Industrial Park. If their target was really the park, they would be able to reach everyone in less than 20 minutes. Captain, what should we do? Bao Chi asked. If this was in Pubei, according to the Dongfeng Corps' usual course of action, they would have already attacked with full firepower and killed everyone with guns one by one. But the problem is that this is not Pubei, but Indonesia. They are not facing the warlord's militia, but unarmed civilians. Even those who carry guns may be legal holders of gun licenses. If you attack without knowing right or wrong and kill someone by mistake, how can you explain to the local government? Chen Chen frowned tightly. He knew that the situation was very urgent. On the one hand, the park may be affected by the crowd. On the other hand, it is impossible for our side to contain the attack in advance. Just like the problem I discussed with Shirdakai, this is a complete paradox. Wait, Shirdakai? Chen Chen subconsciously looked up at the tower, and at this moment, as if by telepathy, Shirdakai's voice came from Chen Chen's headphones. He said, "Call the police, Captain. Call the police first. These things are none of our business now. Let them fight the police. When most of the police are dead or wounded, we will go and rescue them. Also, let Lenny go out of the jungle and get behind them." Chen Chen was stunned. After hesitating for a moment, he looked at Zhang Yang, who had chased him to Bao Chi's side, and said, "Anyway, call the police first." The situation developed extremely quickly. After just 10 minutes, the number of people gathered had reached hundreds. Chen Chen had clearly felt that this was a premeditated action, because even if the people were irrational, it would be impossible for them to quickly organize such a large-scale team without any external interference or guidance. Those armed men with guns were their leaders, and Chen Chen wished he could kill them with one shot. But it is obvious that the consequence of doing so will only make the situation worse. The entire Qingshan Industrial Park has fallen into tension and chaos. All the workers have stopped working and gathered in the factory buildings in the park. The stuffy and noisy environment made their emotions even more unstable. The security department responsible for maintaining order even clashed with small groups of workers several times. If Zhang Yang had not appeared and said that everyone would be paid as usual and an additional subsidy would be given, I am afraid that the Qingshan Industrial Park would have been in chaos even without the people outside rushing in. The 12 men of the Dongfeng Corps had readjusted their combat positions and were all facing the direction where the crowd was gathering, ready for battle. The guns in their hands are all real weapons, and the bullets in the guns are genuine lethal bullets. In their hands, as long as the gunshot is heard, it will definitely mean the death of a life. Chen Chen nervously observed the situation ahead. At this time, the crowd had already reached the gas station, where the road split into 2. To the left, you will go straight to Qingshan Industrial Park. To the right, you will continue along the Ring Island Highway. Chen Chen hoped very much that they would turn right, because that meant that this might just be a group activity, not targeting Qingshan Industrial Park. But unfortunately, the crowd rushed to the road on the left without any hesitation. Less than 600 meters away from Qingshan Industrial Park, Chen Chen could already vaguely hear the slogans they were shouting. Probably in order to make the people in the park understandable. These people's slogans were mixed with Indonesian, English, and even a small amount of Chinese. Advertisement, raise wages. A vacation, we need it. Protect the environment. Stop mining. It's a mess. Too messy. This is not a demonstration with clear demands at all. It is simply a riot without any reason. You guys don't even have a unified slogan. Aren't you being too blatant? Chen Chen sighed softly, then asked into the radio, "Zhang Yang, what's the situation at the police station?" After a moment, Zhang Yang's reply came from the headset. "They have gone to the area where the incident occurred to maintain order, but they have very few people. Less than 20 people. Besides, they don't have any riot gear, so they can't be stopped." "It's right that. You can't stop it." Chen Chen thought secretly in his heart. What he needs to solve is not this problem, but to find the mastermind behind the scenes and eliminate him once and for all. Therefore, as long as the police suffered losses at the hands of these people, it would be logical for him to help them suppress the situation and gain the proactive law enforcement power. So, Chen Chen replied, "Understood. Let's see the situation first. Boss Chen, should we organize the evacuation first? Chinese employees can retreat to the safe house first, leaving the local employees behind. Don't talk nonsense." Chen Chen interrupted Zhang Yang and continued, "Once your people withdraw, the locals will be completely unrestrained. Do you think they will protect the property of Qingshan Group? They will only join those troublemakers in smashing, looting, and burning. Okay, stick to your post and stand where the locals can see you. Don't worry, we'll take care of it." "Clear," Zhang Yang answered decisively. In fact, even if he proposed to retreat to the safe house, it was not because he was a coward, but because he was truly considering the safety of the personnel. Now that Chen Chen has made his attitude clear, there is no need for him to worry about it. If you push them into a corner, the worst that can happen is that both sides will be destroyed. What a joke. Do you really think that we Northerners are soft rabbits that can be manipulated at will? When it comes to the characteristics of a fighting nation, even the Russians are no match for us. Thinking of this, Zhang Yang's expression in the factory became more determined. He turned to Wang Qi, who was waiting on the side, and said, "We don't need so many people here. Take a group of 4 people to support Boss Chen." Remember, listen to him. If he opens fire, just shoot whoever he tells you to shoot. Clear. The crowd continued to approach, and Chen Chen's previous quick observation and decisive decision-making gave Qingshan Park a unique opportunity. Even with the extremely low efficiency of the Indonesian police, by this time, Robota's officers had already arrived at the scene, set up roadblocks on the road in front of the crowd, and began to communicate with the emotional crowd. At this time, the crowd was less than 200 meters away from Qingshan Park. Even without the help of a telescope, Chen Chen could already roughly see the faces of the two parties in the confrontation. The crowd was indeed quite excited. The leader pointed at the police officer's nose and cursed loudly, and the police officer fought back mercilessly. However, in terms of momentum, the police were obviously losing. How does the saying go? The law does not hold everyone responsible. When faced with so many people and such reasonable demands, it is obviously quite difficult for police officers as law enforcers. He could only try his best to persuade and stop them, but such a strategy could not stop the crowd that had already formed a trend. Their confrontation soon became intense, communication was completely ineffective, and police officers holding riot shields stepped forward, waving batons at the crowd in a deterrent manner. They didn't actually hit anyone, but even this action almost made the crowd explode. The conflict broke out immediately. The radicals at the front of the crowd pushed the police officers back. 2 police officers were pushed down and even trampled. They finally stood up with the help of their companions. After standing up, they also began to get angry. The movements became more and more violent, and Chen Chen keenly noticed that one of the police officers had drawn his pistol. In the crowd, militants holding rifles immediately pointed their guns at him. What was funny was that while holding their guns, those people were also waving documents proving the legality of their gun possession. No one really dared to shoot, it was just a deterrent. But as soon as the thing was taken out, the intensity of the confrontation immediately reached its peak. Both sides shouted at each other to put down their guns. At this time, even the slightest disturbance would immediately break the fragile balance. It's time to take action. Chen Chen took a deep breath and was about to give an order, but at this moment, Shi Dakai's voice came from the headset. I'll do it. Lin He, remove the silencer, aim at the top edge of the blast shield and shoot. Be careful not to hit anyone. Try not to hit anyone. Clear. Lin He answered in a low voice. Then, there was a gunshot and the policeman holding the riot shield fell on his back. Everyone was stunned. The crowd fell into an eerie silence for a moment, and then, dense gunfire rang out. Let's fight. The 2 gunmen in the open were instantly knocked down by the police's concentrated fire, but the gunfire did not stop at all, because more armed men with rifles emerged from the crowd. Damn it, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Chen Chen stood up and gave the order. Kill them all, except for the police. Kill all those with guns. These people don't want to cause a riot, they want to cause a massacre. Gunshots rang out one after another. 3 policemen who were intercepting the policemen had fallen. The crowd rushed forward and snatched the pistols from the policemen. The riots have completely turned into riots, and the crowd has gone crazy. In fact, in such a confrontation, gunshots are definitely the final bottom line. No matter how fierce the conflict between the 2 sides is, even if you throw smoke bombs or even incendiary bombs into the crowd, as long as there is no gunshot, everything is still within the controllable range. But if a gunshot is heard, it means that the most violent conflict is about to occur. The confrontation between the conflicting parties is like the confrontation between 2 countries holding nuclear weapons. If one side uses nuclear weapons first, it means that they have played all their cards and the situation is far from being under control. In this case, the only option is for everyone to draw their weapons and fight hard. The police were pinned to the street. They wanted to resist, but the riot gear and small pistols with insufficient firepower in their hands were simply unable to stop the surging crowd. Even if they wanted to rescue their teammates, it had become extremely difficult. As soon as someone falls to the ground, the crazy crowd will rush forward and beat the person with stones, sticks, hands, and feet without regard for the consequences. Blood splattered, and their faces were filled with hatred. They had even forgotten what their original purpose was. They only remembered that they had to beat something, kill something. As all the police officers were surrounded by people, order was completely out of control. The shops on both sides of the road were also affected. People forced the shop owners to join their team. If anyone resisted, they would face the same fate as the police officers. Just 2 minutes after the gunshot, the crowd swelled to its maximum size. They're like a snowball that keeps growing bigger and bigger, and like locusts they are eating away at and infecting other normal people. At this time, the Dongfeng Corps had just arrived at the battlefield. What they are about to face is this group of nearly 1,000 crazy, bloodthirsty rioters. Stop moving forward. A group led by Chen quickly built a defense line on the road. Without hesitation, 2M249s fired at the crowd. The continuous and high-density gunfire made the crowd pause for a moment, but then the armed militants quickly stood up. Da-da-da-da-da, the unique explosion sound of automatic weapons was heard, and a series of sparks exploded on the hood of the vehicle used as a cover. This is the moment Chen Chen was waiting for. If the other party doesn't shoot, I may really be unable to do anything to them. I can just hide in the crowd. I can't really fight a mowing war here, right? But, since you shot me first, don't blame me. Almost no one, including Chen Chen, hit because they had long overcome the instinct to dodge bullets. At the moment the enemy's gunfire sounded, a group of 6 people selected targets from left to right in turn according to the target selection rules they were already familiar with. Within just 2 seconds, 3 armed enemies were locked. Chen Chen's breathing slowed down at this moment. The instincts accumulated from long-term battles had allowed him to reach the heights he had reached in his previous life. At this moment, he even felt that he still had room for a breakthrough. Pulling the gun at a large angle of nearly 60 degrees, the fluorescent reticle of the ACOG seemed to have teleported to overlap with the shooter's body, and while the muzzle was moving, the first trigger had been pulled. The crosshair moved upwards, and when it moved to the lower edge of the enemy's face, Chen Chen's muscles suddenly tensed up, and with a huge burst of strength, he stabilized the muzzle of the gun. Inertia caused the sight to move up a few millimeters, and with the help of the tense muscles at this moment, the second trigger was pulled. Bang! A burst of shots. Blood gushed out. Then, Chen Chen pulled the gun to the right, trying to find the second target, but although the speed of the others was not faster than him, it was not much slower either. The 3 gunmen who were shooting at our side have all fallen, and most of the dozen or so armed men have disappeared into the crowd, seemingly planning to launch a sudden attack after getting close. Chen Chen did not hesitate and immediately gave the order. Throw stun grenades at the crowd. Disperse them. Clear. All members of the team immediately took action, and within a few seconds, 2 rounds of 12 stun grenades were thrown. Bang! 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 There were loud noises one after another. Even in an open environment, the power of stun grenades should not be underestimated. A large number of people who had never seen such a scene and had no professional training fell down instantly. A rough look showed that there were dozens of people. This thing is more useful than a grenade. The people who fell struggled to get up, but their cochleas had been severely affected by the violent noise. Even if they got up, they would fall down again because of dizziness. Everyone take turns to cover and move forward, and continue throwing stun grenades. Chen Chen can't be said to be an expert at riot suppression, but even if he hasn't eaten pork, he has at least seen pigs run. At the command, 6 people were divided into 3 groups and took turns to provide cover and move forward. The vanguard group at the front threw 2 stun grenades each time, further compressing the living space of the crowd. 1,000 people sounds like a lot, but in such a densely packed situation, it only occupies the area of a football field. In just 1 minute, the situation was almost reversed. The crowd began to get chaotic. Those in the front were retreating while shouting frantically, while those at the back were still pushing forward completely unaware. If the situation is allowed to develop, a serious stampede will inevitably occur, and the consequences will be unbearable for anyone. At this time, the second group that Chen Chen had already arranged came into play. Almost in sync with the first group, the second group started throwing stun grenades at the same time. The crowd at the back finally realized that something was wrong, and they began to turn around and flee. But what Chen Chen wanted to do was definitely not just to let them leave. The drone had already taken off, and under Bao Chi's guidance, the crowd's movements were completely transparent to the Dongfeng Corps. What they have to do next is very simple. That is, like a sheepdog, drive everyone to the beach. On the coastal highway, facing the expulsion from machine guns and stun grenades, the direction of the crowd's movement began to slowly change. Chen Chen led a group to continue moving forward, stepping over one corpse after another that had fallen to the ground. They finally found the policemen who were already dying in the crowd. He immediately went forward to check the situation and help the injured police officer up. The other party's faces were full of fear. In fact, this was the first time they had experienced such a large-scale mass incident. Stay where you are. I need your authorization. I need your consent to let us quell the riots. Can you hear me? Chen Chen asked loudly, and the leading police officer looked around blankly and finally nodded. Keep moving forward. Advertisement. Chen Chen stood up and clenched the 416 Hong Kong dollars in his hand. The police officers sat limply on the ground, staring blankly at the backs of the Dongfeng Corps gradually disappearing into the distance. At this moment, they saw something strange from this strange team, or it can be said that they obtained a certain sense of security from the Dongfeng Corps, which was supposed to be provided by them. Stun bomb, smoke bomb, block the escape route, fire warning shots, and control the situation. There's an enemy with a gun at 11 o'clock. Li Gang will clear the way, clear the firing range, and kill him. The southern side needs to strengthen its defenses. Lenny is going to provide support. Don't let any of them go. Stop them all. Orders were issued one after another, and the Dongfeng Corps' actions accelerated. The range of crowd activities has been compressed to the limit, but under the careful management of the Dongfeng Corps, the movement of the crowd began to show a special order. The armed elements hidden in the crowd still wanted to continue to create riots, but their actions were clearly visible from the air. As long as someone dared to draw his gun, no matter which direction the gun was pointing, the 2-man commando team led by Li Bang would quickly use stun grenades to clear a path, disperse the crowd, and then drive straight in and brutally kill the gunman. This happened 3 times, and when the stun grenades on Li Bang were almost used up, all the militants disappeared without a trace. They didn't really disappear, they just realized the failure of the operation and began to hide themselves and try to retreat. However, being caught up in the crowd, even retreating became a luxury for them. A few minutes later, the crowd was finally driven off the ring road and forced onto the beach near the gas station. It was a narrow stretch of beach, and the crowd was trying to jump into the water, but the crossfire from both sides pinned them down. Who wouldn't be afraid of bullets? Originally, the Dongfeng Corps had to worry about casualties, and the muzzles of their guns had to be raised a few inches. But now, on the water, who cares about you? As long as someone goes into the water, the Dongfeng Corps will fire a volley at the water. Anyway, there will be no ricochets on the water surface, and the power of bullets will be greatly reduced after entering the water. Therefore, their only available route of retreat was the beach extending along the coastline. The speed of crowd movement has slowed down significantly, and fear is spreading. They didn't know how many people they had lost, nor who their enemies were. But they knew that these enemies wearing heavy armor and holding advanced guns were more terrifying than any order managers they had ever faced. Group nature is a very strange thing. You can use it to quickly organize a large team, but once you encounter a major setback, the team organized in this way will collapse faster than anything else. Everyone was running for their lives, while the Dongfeng Corps precisely controlled the speed of the flow of people, carefully identifying the armed elements mixed in the crowd. It was really hard for them to hide because they all carried guns. If you want to escape, you have to throw away the gun. But this is their lifeblood. The conflict broke out again. A small group of armed men mixed in the crowd and tried to launch a surprise attack on the Dongfeng Corps. Their bullets luckily hit Li Bang, who was at the front, but Li Bang didn't even shake. He raised his hand and fired a long burst of shots in the direction where the bullet came from. Unlike Chen Chen, he doesn't think at all when he starts fighting. He doesn't care about the political impact or whether or not civilians are hit. Wherever bullets fly, they're my enemies. What? Someone's dead? Blame it on you for standing next to those guys. How should I know if you were waiting for the gunmen to fall down so you could pick up their guns and continue shooting at me? The fierce counterattack created a unique space, and in just a moment, a large area of the crowd was cleared. That's right, the crowd no longer avoided the Dongfeng Corps, but began to avoid the militants mixed in with them. A strange and ridiculous scene appeared on the beach. The two militants looked around blankly and found that everyone was moving away from them, while the heavily armored soldiers with guns in their hands kept shouting to get closer. At this moment, they truly felt what despair was. Chen Chen saw their actions from a distance. He suddenly felt nervous and then gave an order. Li Gang, retreat! No one alive! No one alive! And just as he finished speaking, a slightly sharp shout rang out across the entire beach. Alahibakra, boom! A huge shock wave swept across the entire beach. Li Bang and Yang Shu, who were dozens of meters away from them, were knocked to the ground, and the rioters who had not had time to go far were blown away or even torn apart. Blood and flesh flew everywhere, and a sandstorm blew up on the beach. The crowd fell into a terrible silence. Everyone saw this tragic scene. Then, the next second, the people who were already on the brink of collapse finally dispersed completely. The Dongfeng Corps is no longer able to control these people because they are too afraid of death. They knew that the Dongfeng Corps would not attack unarmed civilians, but the bad guys mixed in the crowd might not be the same. Everyone was running for their lives. Chen Chen did not hesitate and immediately ordered the Dongfeng Corps to assemble and evacuate, retreating to the vicinity of the police to establish a defense line. A few minutes later, the rioters disappeared, leaving only the wounded and corpses on the ground. Groans continued to be heard, and Chen Chen had no energy to check on the wounded. Instead, he ordered his team members to help up the police officers who were still able to move and retreat towards the industrial park. The police chief in the lead was still quite conscious. He tried his best to keep up with Chen Chen's steps and said with a painful expression, "This is a terrorist attack. A terrorist attack." "Yes, this is a terrorist attack." Chen Chen answered immediately, and then continued. "Fortunately, we discovered it quickly. Otherwise, if they succeeded and detonated the bomb in a crowded area, the consequences would be even more serious. Withdraw now and contact your superiors. We need support. Lots of support." JIS and EAM have gone crazy. Their target is not Qingshan Industrial Park at all. They just want to kill people. We have to strike them all the way, and this is the best chance. Their activities will be very intense. Now is the time for you to take credit. At the same time, inside Qingshan Park, in the factory, the workers gathered here were already in a panic. In the past 10 minutes or so, they clearly heard the sound of gunfire and continuous explosions that were almost close at hand, and they also heard the painful cries of the thugs who were hit and knocked down by stun grenades. All of this made them feel terrified, and this fear eventually turned into anger towards Qingshan Group. The situation has developed to this point, and you are still keeping us locked up here? They say it's for our safety, but what's the reality? If someone rushed in now, where could we hide? In other words, if the enemy of those people was Qingshan Group, what did it have to do with us workers? Panic spread among the crowd like a plague. Zhang Yang led all the Chinese employees to divide nearly 600 workers into many groups according to the work teams, trying to separate them according to the principle of isolation and placement so that they could quickly concentrate their efforts to deal with any abnormal movements. At the same time, the security department had also made preparations. They stood guard at the factory door with guns, guarding against any enemies that might come in. But such actions not only failed to bring comfort to the workers, but instead made more people suspicious. Without strong control, human nature is actually quite sinister. They will not assume others are good, but will judge others by their own standards and assume that everyone has ulterior motives. Just like now, Zhang Yang obviously gathered them together for the safety of the factory and the workers, but in their eyes, this could even be equivalent to a premeditated massacre. What if someone detonated a bomb? What if someone broke into the factory? Wouldn't the casualties be greater the more people there are? Of course, their considerations are not without reason. It should be said that compared with outsiders like Zhang Yang, they understand the local JD organization's operations better. But Zhang Yang had no choice because he knew that in the chaos, if he let these people go, it wouldn't be long before they would become the biggest destabilizing factor. He could only take a risk and bet that the Dongfeng Corps could solve the problem. But there were hundreds of people, possibly thousands. How could the Dongfeng Corps suppress the riot with just a dozen people? Unless it was a massacre, Zhang Yang felt a chill in his heart. And at this moment, Wang Qi just happened to walk to his side. It's almost impossible to suppress it. These people are going crazy. We have to make a decision quickly. Either let them go home or disperse them to other places. Otherwise, once these people start to rebel and unite inside and outside, we will really have no chance. Hearing Wang Qi's words, Zhang Yang nodded heavily. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Wait a little longer, don't let him go yet. Release them now is like releasing an unstable bomb. We are short of manpower to begin with, and we will be even less able to control them if we scatter them. We'll wait for news from Boss Chan then." Bang! Halfway through his words, a loud and sharp sound suddenly rang out in the factory. Then a series of glass bottles were broken. Zhang Yang turned around and saw that all the local workers in a team in the distance had stood up. They smashed the glass bottles of Coke that had just been provided to them, pushed away the Chinese employees who were trying to dissuade them, and rushed toward Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang subconsciously took a step back, while Wang Qi put down his gun and went forward. He really didn't dare to use the gun to make any provocative moves at this time, because he knew that if the gun went off accidentally, it would be an abyss of no return for Qingshan Group. Outside, you can use a gun to beat those extremists, at least you can explain it. But you can shoot workers inside a factory? Even if we say it to the sky, it will be a diplomatic incident that will cost lives. So, we can only talk to them and have a good talk. But he wanted to talk, but the leading workers had no intention of talking at all. As soon as Wang Qi walked up to him, the burly worker suddenly raised his fist and punched Wang Qi in the face. Wang Qi was caught off guard and fell down instantly, while the crowd stepped over him and continued to walk toward Zhang Yang. Advertisement, this was an obvious insult. Wang Qi desperately raised his hands to protect his head. He even had the urge to just give up the money and kill all these people. But in the end, he still suppressed his emotions and waited until all those people had passed over his head before he stood up in embarrassment. At this time, the worker had rushed to Zhang Yang and grabbed his collar. He cursed loudly, while Zhang Yang kept explaining in a somewhat humble manner. The worker became more and more agitated. He raised his hand and slapped Zhang Yang hard in the face. The security guard on the side tried to stop him, but Zhang Yang waved him off. There is no other way but to let these people vent their emotions. His face was completely swollen, and his brain even began to feel dizzy from the heavy blow. Reality gradually became blurred, and at this moment, bang, a gunshot rang out, plunging the entire factory into silence. The worker looked up in surprise and joy. He thought that the time had come when he could really cause trouble. However, when he actually saw the team appearing in front of him, his expression suddenly changed. It was not the police, nor the team he was familiar with in the factory. Instead, they were covered in the smell of gunpowder and blood, holding murderous weapons that exuded murderous aura, and were full of hostility. They were a real killing team. He was very familiar with this temperament because he had seen it in some of his companions. Almost subconsciously, he loosened his grip on Zhang Yang's collar, but the team that had just pushed open the factory gate and entered in a line had no intention of stopping. They quickly dispersed, held their guns level, and took control of the entire factory area. Everyone squat. Chen Chen shouted in the Indonesian language he had just learned and pulled the trigger at the same time. The sound of gunfire continued to echo in the factory. After the echo disappeared, the entire factory fell silent. He gave Li Bang a look, and the latter understood and walked forward, kicking down the worker standing in front of Zhang Yang. Then he stepped on the man's chest and pointed the M249 in his hand straight at the man's head. The safety was on. With just a simple move from Chen Chen, the man's head would explode on the ground. The intense fear made the man tremble all over, and water even began to seep out from under his body. But fortunately, Chen Chen finally shook his head and said to Zhang Yang, "The riot is resolved. 9 police officers were injured, 2 were seriously injured, and 1 died. It's not over yet. We have to clean up this mess once and for all. Let the security department come in and take care of these workers. Tell these workers that we have received authorization from the police station and will launch a hunt for the JD elements who carried out the terrorist attack. Within the next 2 hours, if any unusual movement occurs in the factory, all participants will be considered accomplices of the JD elements. Now, everyone, be quiet. We'll come back to settle the accounts in 2 hours. Bao Qi, report your location." The target entered the Darul Jihad Mosque and has been missing for 4 minutes. No new signs of human activity have been seen. It is confirmed that the target is still inside the mosque, and I am keeping watch on him. Yang Shu, report on the equipment preparation. Is the remote control car ready? It's adjusted and can be started at any time. Dukai, report the monitoring situation of the police channel. How long will they take? Police are calling for backup. The nearest 88th Task Force Operation Squadron is in Kindali. It will take at least 2 hours for them to arrive. Ordinary police officers from nearby police stations are on their way to provide support. It is estimated that it will take at least 20 minutes to reach La Boda Police Station and an hour to complete the deployment. Damn, that's too slow. In the land cruiser provided by Qingshan Group, Chen Chen kept issuing new instructions. Judging from the feedback from all sides, in the face of this sudden terrorist attack with obvious intentions and unquestionable characteristics, the fastest response was not from the 88th Task Force, nor the local police station, but actually from his own Dongfeng Corps, which had no anti-terrorism obligations at all. Ordinary police officers need an hour to arrive, but the 88th Task Force needs 2 hours? How long does it take to launch an attack? 2 minutes is already a lot. From the explosion to the completion of the evacuation, those JD elements may only need a few dozen seconds. In these tens of seconds, if you fail to grasp the clues they left behind and fail to hold on to them tightly, it will be almost impossible for you to catch them again in the later investigation. Because these people who strap bombs to their bodies are JD elements, and when they put down the bombs, they're no different from all the civilians here. There is no other way but to rely on myself. This is a rather risky action. Although the Dongfeng Corps has obtained verbal authorization from the local police station, verbal authorization is verbal after all. If the other party refuses to acknowledge it later, the Dongfeng Corps will face a very embarrassing situation. But Chen Chen couldn't care less. His thinking was always very straightforward. When you encounter a problem, solve it. When you encounter an enemy, defeat the enemy. To put it another way, counterterrorism is the biggest political correctness in the world, and Cossack counterterrorism is not without precedent. It's hard to say if the police were fine, but now that the police are dead, we are helping you to avenge. Are you going to deny the identities of these JD elements for a little bit of political benefit? Unless you don't want Sulawesi anymore. Unless you don't want to maintain the grassroots police force. Thinking of this, Chen Chen took a deep breath, and then continued. Everyone remember to wear a mask. We acted independently this time and have nothing to do with our employer. We were only asked by the Labada police station to temporarily undertake security tasks. In order to completely eliminate the threat, we took the initiative to launch an attack on the JD elements. Remember, do not harm civilians. If the other party is unarmed, we should not shoot before them anyway. I mean, we're always on guard. As soon as the other side's gun flashed, we immediately opened fire and returned fire. Because of the difference in the speed of the bullets, it looks like we fired the first shot. Do you understand? Clear. Everyone answered immediately. And at this time, the vehicle had passed the almost unobstructed roundabout road and arrived only 1 kilometer away from the Darul Jihad Mosque. Captain, there are a lot of people ahead. Should we abandon the vehicle and walk? Bao Qi asked on the radio. No, we need mobility and can't lose even a second. What about the situation at the mosque? Stable. No one was found to have left. Understood, keep going. 2 minutes later, 3 land cruisers had arrived at the outskirts of the mosque and parked in a triangular position on 3 sides of the extremely small mosque, restricting the entire building within its control range. Get off! At Chen Chen's command, everyone immediately opened the car door. Bao Qi issued a cruise command and gave up control of the drone. Afterwards, together with Yang Shu, the two took out the remote-controlled unmanned vehicle that had already been debugged from the back seat and completed the release in just a few seconds. At the same time, Sniper Shidekai and Yang Shu also adjusted their combat positions, using trees and low walls about 100 meters away as cover, pointing their guns at the front of the mosque and controlling all windows and door openings. The machine gunner pulled out the tripod and mounted the M249 on the hood. Any moving target with a weapon in hand would be immediately riddled with armor-piercing incendiary bullets. Chen Chen led a group of assault troops to lurk behind the car, ready to launch a raid on the building at any time. Their time is very limited. Although the people around them are frightened by their display and dare not approach, no one can guarantee that the enemy will not come from behind. So, after everything was ready, the first thing Chen Chen did was to throw a smoke bomb behind him to block the view from behind. Immediately afterwards, 2 remote-controlled unmanned vehicles drove out, one in front and one behind, approaching the main entrance of the mosque. The low steps of the main entrance could not stop the tracked unmanned vehicle. After easily crossing them, the unmanned vehicle arrived at the side of the main entrance. A simple retractable camera extends out and begins surveillance from the window. From the images sent back by the unmanned vehicle, Chen Chen saw the situation inside. To his surprise, the person he was looking for was in the main hall of the mosque. At least 2 security guards with guns stood in the corner, watching the window and door vigilantly. 2 other armed men with guns on their backs were checking the condition of a wounded man lying on the ground. A man who looked like a leader was standing there, seemingly reprimanding his men for their poor actions that resulted in heavy casualties. They had obviously noticed the arrival of the Dongfang Corps. The armed man next to the wounded man seemed to want to rush out, but was held back by his companions. The people inside broke out into a heated argument, and Chen really wanted to find out what they were arguing about. The driverless car is equipped with a radio function, but the technical level of this thing is not high, and the radio effect is also very poor. Chen Chen could only barely hear the voices inside, and he couldn't understand the content at all. However, one thing was certain. These people spoke neither English nor Indonesian, to more like Arabic. Chen Chen's heart skipped a beat, and he subconsciously wanted to order an attack to capture all the people inside. But looking at the 3 JD members who were unaware of the unmanned vehicle in the surveillance video, he finally suppressed his impulse and said to Bao Qi, "Record it and keep it well. This could be key evidence. Hold your position and bide your time. If they make any move, we'll kill them. If not, we'll throw smoke bombs in there to force them to move." At this moment, inside the mosque, the imam named Rahman stood angrily beside the wounded man who was already covered in blood and shouted at the armed men who still had guns in their hands. "I already told you not to be impulsive. Don't be impulsive. What we need is more time to prepare. What we need is a perfect and quick action. We are not warlords, nor are we rebels. We can't do the same thing. What I need to do is spread the name of Allah and clean up those kafirs in a proper way. Look at the good things you have done. Advertisement. You made our brother's sacrifice in vain, but you didn't achieve the effect we wanted at all. Revenge? What kind of revenge is this? If Baslan were still alive, he would certainly rebuke your stupidity, just as I do. No, even if he is already in heaven, he will still be angry after seeing the stupid things you did. Why don't you go through me? Why do you act on your own? Do you really think you can defeat them? They're outside the door now. If it weren't for the legal restrictions, they would have rushed in and killed us all. Do you think such a death is meaningful? Not only is it not martyrdom, it's not even a sacrifice." Hearing his words, the militant standing on his left subconsciously raised his head and said, "We almost succeeded. We have killed the police there, and we are only 100 meters away from the factory." "Idiot! Idiot!" Rahman raised his hand, as if he wanted to slap the man opposite him, but in the end he held back and said, "You destroyed the results of my hard work here. You should have stayed in Reborn, not come to Sulawesi. The situation here is completely different from yours. You can't interfere with my plan. It's too late to say anything now. Tell me, how should we solve this situation?" The man was silent for a moment. Then he said, "We'll hold you hostage. I will use our lives to make amends for the mistakes we have made and to atone for our sins before Allah. You are still the imam here, and no one will question you. Don't worry, they don't dare to come in on their own initiative. They are not police officers, and they have no evidence. 2 of us even had gun licenses, as long as we insisted that we had. Nothing to do with the explosion on the beach. The most we would get is imprisonment. This is just a riot caused by unfair treatment. Some people got involved, and I will explain it clearly." Hearing his words, Rahman sighed heavily and then replied, "No, that's not enough. You are going to die. This is the only way. You have to make sacrifices. Raise your gun and point it at me. Take me away, and then you must die under their guns. Only in this way can we turn the situation around. They have no power to enforce the law. If we cannot drive them out with the fire of God, we can only rely on the power of the secular kafirs. God bless you." As he spoke, Rahman took a step to the left. At this time, he was facing the door, and the militant next to him raised his gun and pointed it at the back of his head. After hesitating for a moment, he suddenly asked, "You don't have any explosive devices on you anymore, right?" "No." The man behind him answered firmly, and Rahman did not stop and walked towards the door. The moment he stepped out of the door, the expression on his face became extremely terrified, and then he shouted loudly, "Help! Help! Don't shoot! Call the police for me!" He shouted as loudly as he could, so that the residents not far away could hear his cries. "No matter what the truth is, as long as I shout it out, I can confirm the fact that I was kidnapped and maintain my position here." He didn't expect to deceive the enemies in front of him at all. How could the enemies who could accurately find Baslan and ruthlessly clean him up be so easy to deceive? The only trump card in my hand now is the law. As long as they take the initiative in this regard, these foreign mercenaries will have no way to do anything to them. Thinking of this, Ramon couldn't help but feel a little proud. In fact, many people thought that people like him were rats hiding in the dark and would be quickly cleared out as soon as they showed their heads. But in fact, he and most of his subordinates are citizens with legal status. Under the sun, we are no different from any other citizens. What can you do to me? Before there is sufficient evidence to prove that I am involved in those things, I am just an innocent person. What? You want to shoot innocent people? This country can't accommodate you. And even the whole world can't accommodate you. Ramon's opposite. Chen Chen could almost be said to be stunned by their operation. Are you taking me for a fool? The mosque is the first evacuation point for the militants, and you have a close relationship with them. Why are you trying to use the so-called rules to get out of this situation? This is too stupid and arrogant. But I have to say, it is very useful. The armed men on the opposite side kept cursing in English, seemingly trying to provoke Chen Chen and lure him into shooting. They made no effort to hide, and their entire bodies were exposed to the guns of the Dongfeng Corps. With just a simple pull of the trigger, all the attackers who directly caused the riot would pay with their lives. A very tempting choice. But Chen Chen knew that this was definitely not the best choice. Once this happens, not only will the imam, who is obviously the leader, survive, but the imam's identity will also be completely confirmed. If they kill everyone without any care, the Dongfeng Corps will no longer be able to exist in Indonesia, even if it is not regarded as a hostile force by the Indonesian government. But no matter which option is chosen, the clues have been completely cut off. This is what the imam really wanted. There is no optimal solution. The only thing we can do is to choose the lesser of two evils. Chen Chen made a decisive decision, and then he said, no one is allowed to shoot. Shorty machine gun fire, kill them all. If you can't handle it this time, you can go back to Pubei and exchange the mulberry leaves. Remember, you killed the hostage by mistake. Clear. The short man didn't hesitate at all. After a brief pause, the sound of machine gun explosion rang out. Within 10 seconds, all the moving targets in front of him fell down. No one survived. In fact, Chen Chen had his own considerations for his persistence in killing the leader of the extremists. The reason is simple. The JD organization is different from most other organized crime gangs. It is an organization that relies heavily on personal charm and personal worship. As the so-called spokesperson for Allah, the leader of a JD organization is often a deified being. Every word he says is the spokesperson for Allah, and every action he takes is performing a miracle on behalf of God. Only by maintaining such divinity can he maintain the cohesion of an organization. Therefore, the biggest difference between the JD organization and criminal gangs lies in the irreplaceable nature of the leader. For a gang of evil forces, or a warlord organization, the boss is killed. It doesn't matter, the second, third, or even a nobody can take the position. After all, the organization is based on interests. As long as the framework system remains unchanged, whoever can make everyone rich will be the boss. Just like the 7th Brigade before, the Chen family was wiped out, and he, Bupa, who was originally unknown, took the opportunity to rise to the top. Similarly, if Zhao Jiaoyang was killed, the coalition forces could quickly take over. But the JD organization is different. If the leader is killed, the entire organization will be severely damaged, and there may even be a situation where the whole organization will be in chaos if the leader is killed. Because without the positive reinforcement of regularity, once the brainwashing process is interrupted, those peripheral members will quickly alienate themselves from the core of the organization and eventually collapse like a pile of loose sand. Once the process of secularization begins, it will be quite difficult to pull them back into fanatical religious worship. Therefore, the decapitation operation against the head of the JD organization has always been the most core task in the anti-terrorism struggle of various countries. When this opportunity was presented to Chen Chen, how could he miss it? Who cares about laws and rules? My gang has emerged from a lawless place. At worst, I will retreat back to Pubei. If you have the guts, you can ask Interpol to contact Myanmar and ask them to send people to Mungka to arrest me. My tank is coming soon. What? Do you want to show me how to blast a tank with a pistol like in Private Ryan? In short, although Chen Chen's order to let the short men kill indiscriminately was risky, it was not an impulse. After making sure that everyone had fallen, he decided to go all out and no longer considered leaving any survivors. Instead, he ordered the short men to shoot all the JD members one by one. After making sure that they were all dead, he quickly recorded the evidence with the camera and led the team to evacuate. When he returned to Qingshan campus, less than 2 hours had passed since they started participating in the riot suppression operation. In the park, the restless workers were completely suppressed, and the first thing Chen Chen said when he saw Zhang Yang was, "Catch the person who led the riot. I suspect he may be related to extremists." Hearing his words, Zhang Yang replied without any hesitation, "I have put him in solitary confinement. Even if he has nothing to do with the JD elements, he is at least an unstable factor. I will find a way to deal with it later. This incident has indeed taught us a lesson. The gap between the workers here and the workers in China is too big. I'm thinking maybe I should get a new group of people over here. Change a group of people." Suddenly, a flash of inspiration came to Chen Chen's mind. If we really need to replace people, we don't have to come from the north. If we can solve the identity problem of Pubei people, wouldn't they be the best cheap labor? There is no need to give them extra subsidies because of the chaotic situation and the salary requirements are low. The most important thing is that these people are much more obedient than local Indonesians. Chen Chen secretly made a plan in his mind, but he didn't say it immediately. Instead, he nodded and continued. "That's something for later. We have more pressing problems to deal with right now. Once police support arrives, I need you to help us communicate." "No problem," Zhang Yang answered immediately, and then asked, "What did you guys do outside?" "We have wiped out the lair of this group of JD elements right in the Darul Jihad Mosque. We killed some people without law enforcement authority." "Did I guessed it?" Zhang Yang's expression did not change much, as if he had already anticipated the measures that the Dongfeng Corps might take. He thought for a moment, and then carefully confirmed, "Does the other party have a gun?" "Yes, and there are many of them, all long spears. That's basically not a big problem." Zhang Yang breathed a sigh of relief and said, The level of law enforcement in Sulawesi is very low, and cases are basically handled based on connections. These people have just caused such a big incident, and it already has obvious signs of a terrorist attack. It's no big deal to kill them. At least I can guarantee that no one will try to arrest you anytime soon. But in the coming period, we may have to engage in quite complex negotiations and mediation. So simple? Chen Chen was surprised when he heard Zhang Yang's words. He had already prepared for the worst, but why did it seem like Zhang Yang didn't take it seriously? Before Zhang Yang could answer, Chen Chen asked again, "We also killed an imam. He was most likely the leader of the JD elements, but he pretended to be an innocent person. Is the person definitely dead? Definitely dead. Then there's no question. He says he's innocent. So he's innocent? Those who stand with JD elements are JD elements. This is a very simple judgment. But he was pretending to be hijacked." Chen Chen scratched his head. He realized that he seemed to have some cognitive bias, but he couldn't figure out exactly where it was. And then, Zhang Yang's words suddenly enlightened him. "Have you ever seen JD members taking hostages? If this happens, there are only two possibilities. Either they are not JD members, or the people being held hostage are not hostages." That I see. Great enlightenment. It has to be said that Zhang Yang is much more familiar with the rules of this land than himself. In his view, his concerns are just bargaining chips that can be traded. Businessmen are businessmen. They can talk about anything and negotiate anything, right? If that's the case, wouldn't I be able to be more relaxed in my actions here in the future? Chen Chen didn't propose this idea radically, because he knew that everything had to wait until this incident was dealt with before making a final conclusion. Soon, the first batch of police support arrived, and Qingshan Industrial Park, which had solved its own internal problems, also began to mobilize medical resources to rescue the injured. It was not until this time that Chen Chen realized that the largest and best-equipped hospital near Laboda was actually the Park Clinic in Qingshan Park. In addition to the large number of medical equipment prepared by CIU for Pingchuan, the medical technology of this clinic can be said to have almost reached the first-class level in the whole of Sulawesi. All injured police officers received timely medical treatment, and Pingchuan also provided basic treatment to the civilians who were in the hands of the rioters. Advertisement: the seriously injured were quickly sent to Kendari, 120 kilometers away from Laboda. It took a full 4 hours for the aftermath of the riot to gradually subside. The Darul Jihad Mosque was protected by a police cordon, and Chen Chen took advantage of this time to quickly contact the Arabic translator and began to translate the conversations between the armed personnel inside the mosque recorded by the remote-controlled unmanned vehicle. "We need perfect, fast-action revenge. Clear Kafir, sacrifice brothers." Key words emerged one after another, and Chen Chen finally felt relieved. "I'm not mistaken this time. This imam named Rahman is the leader of the JD forces near Laboda." And from their conversation, it seems that the JD elements who launched the attack this time were not local forces in Sulawesi, but came from Kriven instead. This is not good news. Our whereabouts were exposed too quickly. Someone must be biting our tail. "Is it MPRI? Shurdakai on the side asked tentatively. "I don't know. MPRI, CIA, or DSS are all possible. It is in their interest to have us fight against the JD elements. It can even be said that they are using us as a gun. We lost. They killed us and got rid of a major threat. We can continue our operations in Sulawesi in the future. We won. At least the JD elements were defeated, and their pressure in the Middle East and Syria will be greatly reduced. We can't let them lead us by the nose like this. We have to find a way to get to the heart of the problem as quickly as possible and get rid of their control as soon as possible. We can fight the JD elements, but this is not our main mission. Our goal is to weaken their power in Indonesia and create space for their deployment in the north. It's difficult." Shurdakai sighed and continued. "The main thing is that there is no name for it. It's like we have to pick up a hot iron pot, but the pot has no handle. Nobody..." Chen Chen added. "Yes, there is no handle, the underlying logic is unclear, and the task granularity is too coarse." "Stop for a moment, YR. You still using workplace jargon?" Chen Chen shook his head helplessly and said, "I can only do it step by step. Now, please export the video to me. I need to submit the evidence first." Chen Chen quickly submitted a copy of the video as evidence to the police who came to support him and explained the general content of the video. After clarifying the content of the recording, the police quickly characterized the incident as a terrorist attack under the guise of a mass incident. Just as Zhang Yang said, from beginning to end, the Dongfeng Corps did not encounter any difficulties. This was naturally related to the tragic consequences, solid evidence, and adverse social impact of the attack. But more importantly, it was the security maintenance fee that he quickly arranged and provided to the police. Chen Chen had already planned to send Ai Jiao back to Pubei, but what was unbearable was that not only did those police officers not treat him as a criminal, they even looked at him as if he were a hero, which gave Ai Jiao great satisfaction. After all, he has made a lot of money, but his spiritual sense of identity is still quite insufficient. Soon, the situation in Laboda was stabilized after the police intervened, but this did not mean that the whole incident ended there. The investigation and pursuit work was carried out quickly, and the 88th Task Force, which was far away in Makassar, also arrived in Laboda. Just as Chen Chen was busy communicating with the police and trying to gain more opportunities for subsequent cooperation, in the Darul Jihad Mosque, two men stood next to a pile of corpses, directing their men to collect evidence while discussing the situation at the scene in a disjointed manner. .5.56 times 45 NATO bullets, M249 strafing. The shooter did not hesitate at all. After all the militants fell to the ground, he continued to use the machine gun to strafe the bodies on the ground with the purpose of killing all these people. After the shooting, he fired several short bursts to follow up. You can see the heads of these corpses have basically all exploded. On average, each head was given 2 or 3 bullets, and this was a supplementary shot. So I told you a long time ago that these people from EW are not ordinary PMCs, not ordinary mercenaries. They are real killers. They're even less cautious than us. In this case, we might try to capture them, but they just clean up. The person who spoke was Buck, and after hearing his words, Ali beside him nodded slightly and continued. This time we can really see their fighting style. If the kidnapping in Krivon was just a successful special operation, then this time it was a formal clearance. I don't understand how they were able to suppress such a large-scale mass incident. Stun bomb. Buck showed a complicated smile on his face and then explained. According to the on-site situation known to the police, the 12 EW personnel threw at least 40 stun grenades. You know, it is very dangerous to rashly use stun grenades in such a crowded situation. If you are not careful, it will cause a large-scale stampede and cause huge casualties. However, they had no such concerns at all. They even found time to kill several armed militants in the extremely chaotic situation. The explosion happened at that time. The two bombers probably wanted to rush into the Qingshan campus to detonate, but they were cornered by EW. Having said this, Buck paused involuntarily. After a few seconds of silence, he continued with emotion. To be honest, I am really jealous of them. If our actions can be as decisive and fierce as theirs, then I believe that the crackdown on those JD elements in the country will be much more effective than it is now. Unfortunately, we have too many concerns. Yes, Ali nodded silently and suddenly spoke again. I heard that the superiors have a very ambiguous attitude towards what has happened during this period. You know, don't discuss this. Buck interrupted him immediately and changed the subject. Anyway, we should go meet them. Let's go. No matter they are enemies or allies, we should at least thank them for fighting this time. What you guys did this time is a bit too big. In the office, Chen Chen held the phone in his hand and listened to the other little fish's lecture with a submissive look on his face. In fact, you have a better way to deal with it. You don't need to wait for the riots to actually break out. When you monitor the riots, you can immediately call the police, obtain the police's authorization, and work with the police to go directly to the mosque to arrest the main person and suppress the riots. This is the best solution. It not only achieves the same goal, but also reduces the impact of the incident. But I can't blame you. I think I can understand your thoughts. The constraints on law enforcement power are indeed strong. But you have to understand that Indonesia is not a country with a sound legal system. There are many things that can be manipulated. A very simple statistic is that about 1,500 people die in Sulawesi each year due to various violent incidents, but less than 1/10 of them are actually investigated. Of the 1 in 10 cases, nearly 2/3 never get resolved, even in a big city like Makassar. Their crime clearance rate is horrifyingly low. The lower the clearance rate, the lower the case filing rate. So, as long as there is a legitimate reason, you don't have to worry about the Dongfeng Corps being punished later. We can handle the shooting in Jakarta, not to mention Sulawesi. In this regard, we still need to align our strategies to avoid problems caused by cognitive bias in the future. Clear. Chen Chen nodded slightly, then said, but no matter what, this is already hindsight. This matter has become a big deal. How to clean it up and deal with it later still depends on you. Well, shouldn't you share your ideas with me in advance to avoid any problems in cooperation? Why do you think I called you? Xiaoyu sighed and continued. You've only been in Indonesia for a little over a week, and you've already made 4 big news stories. The Sulawesi terrorist attack has made international headlines. According to preliminary information, the number of civilians killed in the attack should be more than 10. Adding the casualties of the JD elements themselves, the death toll will definitely exceed 20. The number of 20 people is a major event no matter where you put it. The Indonesian government will definitely take major action. The conflict between the civilian government and the military government will intensify in a short period of time. And the reaction at the grassroots level, which is most relevant to you, is that the antagonism between ordinary police and the 88th Task Force will increase. We will find a way to clean up your mess, but you have to make good use of this opportunity. How to use it? Chen Chen asked. In fact, he already had a rough plan in mind because this time the turmoil would obviously quickly cause Indonesia's grassroots law enforcement forces to enter the civil strife stage, and all he had to do was to choose a side. As for which side to choose, it obviously cannot be Task Force 88, because their relationship with the United States is quite ambiguous. It is okay at the grassroots level, but there must be collusion at the top level. Then, there is only one choice left for yourself. Help the police. Find a way to gain the recognition of the police station, find a way to get their authorization, and use your powerful combat power that far exceeds that of the grassroots police station to gain bargaining chips to help them compete with Task Force 88. Whether from a macro perspective or from the mission of the Dongfeng Corps, this is the best choice. However, whether to make this choice or not depends on Xiaoyu's opinion. Xiaoyu's answer was indeed within Chen Chen's expectations. She said, let's work with the police. The Indonesian police have extensive experience in international cooperation and also have precedents of using outsourced police forces. The most typical example is the SMP, Sungkem National Police Partnership, which provides an important part of the Indonesian police force. You don't need to replace SMP, but you can supplement SMP's shortcomings. Because the SMP can only provide junior security personnel, its combat effectiveness is quite weak. As the situation continues to develop, the anti-terrorism situation becomes more severe and the confrontation becomes more intense. The Indonesian police will inevitably need a strong force to consolidate their grassroots rule, and this is your opportunity. I see. Chen Chen nodded suddenly. In fact, he had heard of the SMP organization in his previous life. At that time, the North was in the midst of a large-scale discussion or debate on the necessity of the existence of private armed forces. Some people suggested that they could refer to the experience of the Russian Cossacks and the Indonesian SMP organization to set up an outsourced, independent private armed force with certain law enforcement powers but not tied to the police organization as a pioneer force in anti-terrorism operations. Of course, this suggestion was ultimately rejected for various reasons, but Chen Chen still wrote down the name. However, SMP does not actually have any amazing achievements, and most of the time their status is no different from that of the auxiliary police in the North. The only difference is that gun licenses are quite common within the SMP. In fact, this is one of the sources of the huge loophole in Indonesia's gun control. Chen Chen still remembered that in 2022, a major police corruption case broke out in Indonesia, involving hundreds of millions of US dollars and multiple shooting deaths, and that case was related to SMP. Apart from these issues that he didn't need to care about, Xiaoyu's idea was indeed feasible. It can not only solve the problem of law enforcement power that the Dongfeng Corps lacks the most, but also achieve precise strikes and weaken the infiltration power of certain forces. It can be said to kill two birds with one stone. So, Chen Chen continued. If we can reach cooperation with the police, the subsequent tasks will be much easier to carry out. But there is still a question. When will our mission be completed? I mean, the nature of the mission is security, but we can't stay here forever. You have to give me a clear target and tell me how to accomplish it. After hearing what Chen Chen said, Xiaoyu on the other side was silent for a few seconds, and then said, this issue should have been made clear long ago. But I won't lie to you. The incident you're involved in has such a huge impact that it's impossible for me to share all the information with you. But if I have to give you an indicator, it's very simple. Qingshan Group is negotiating for seaports. They will try to take over a port in South Sulawesi. What you have to do is to ensure that before this port is taken, Qingshan Group's park in Laboda is not taken over by others. This is very important. I mean, the park must remain stable and profitable. So, wait a moment. Chen Chen suddenly interrupted Xiaoyu because he keenly caught a familiar keyword from her previous words. The port in South Sulawesi? Could it be? You're not talking about Bali Bali? Advertisement. Xiaoyu on the other end of the phone fell silent for a moment. After a long while, she suddenly asked in a serious tone. How did you guess that? How did I guess that? Chen Chen was speechless. He really couldn't explain how he guessed this because this port was actually not very famous. It's not even as famous as Kaiapio Port. But the problem is that for someone who pays attention to military affairs and maritime situations, this name is too familiar. No, it is not an important resource port or trade port. It is a world-renowned maritime force and an important transit supply port after 2012. Chen Chen remembered very clearly that in the previous life, after the confrontation became more intense, the other party conducted large-scale exploration in the nearby waters, established a wealth of routes, and even formed a stable starting position. The strait between Sulawesi and Kalimantan is one of their most important channels. I don't know how many times the Reagan fleet entered the Timor Sea from the South Pacific, entered the Celebes Sea through the Makassar Strait, and then continued to move northwest into the area where they had stirred up countless storms. This place has in fact become their attack position, and their bombers have even flown over the Sulawesi Sea countless times. It's really a big deal. But when I think about it this way, what I am doing is really in line with the usual routine of a certain long-eared creature. First, establish a presence in the local area with business strategies, then find ways to deepen cooperation, introduce deep strategies, and finally seize the local extraterritorial rights. Bah, what extraterritorial rights? That's called joint development. The fish on the opposite side was still waiting for his answer. After hesitating for a few seconds, Chen Chen said, this matter is a long story. Anyway, I heard some key words from Baslin's confession before, but I didn't take it seriously at that time. Now that you say that, wait, Comrade Xiaoyu, you're not gonna fucking want us to blow up an aircraft carrier in the future, are you? Can you control your mouth? How dare you say anything? Xiaoyu on the opposite side cursed angrily, and Chen Chen realized that he had said the wrong thing. He could only smile awkwardly and not refute. Xiaoyu almost fainted from not being able to catch her breath. After a long while, she continued, anyway, this is probably what happened. Your mission is very clear. In the future, we expect you may face pressure from two main sources. On one hand, there is pressure from the JD organization controlled by certain forces. On the other hand, there is direct pressure from MPRI. MPRI will definitely take the initiative to attack you. You must be prepared. I see. Chen Chen nodded quickly and took the opportunity to complain to the boss. If that's the case, then the equipment we have is totally inadequate. We need more heavy equipment, we need riot control weapons, we need high mobility vehicles. I mean, can we get more helicopters? If possible, we also need fixed-wing aircraft as a means of delivery within the island. I will purchase it for you through Qingshan Group. This time, Xiaoyu did not refuse at all. As for heavy equipment and heavy weapons, I can only say that any explosives are quite sensitive in Indonesia, let alone artillery. But I have a plan to get you something else first, something more useful. What? Chen Chen perked up and quickly asked. Dog? Dog? What dog? A mechanical dog? No, they're just ordinary military dogs, bomb disposal dogs, and guard dogs. Are you kidding me? Are you really going to spend a fortune? Chen Chen was horrified. He had never thought that Xiaoyu would actually want to send him a military dog. Contrary to many people's impressions, military dogs in reality are not the kind of thing that can be mass-produced for 200 yuan each in Red Alert. The training cost of a military dog that truly reaches combat level is at least $50,000 US. Moreover, after a military dog is trained, it will cost at least several $1,000s a month in maintenance costs. The average monthly cost of American military dogs is more than $1,000. This thing is a complete luxury, because no country has the ability to mass-produce qualified military dogs. But its uses are huge. In anti-terrorism operations, especially in anti-terrorism and riot control operations in densely populated areas, there is a world of difference between having dogs and not having dogs. For the mission that the Dongfeng Corps will perform next, there is indeed no more suitable equipment than a group of excellent military dogs. During the decapitation operation against IS leader Baghdadi, after he was forced into a desperate situation, the Americans relied on a Belgian Malinois to complete the final kill. During Operation Poseidon Spear, the commando team that killed Osama bin Laden also brought a military dog. This is enough to illustrate the role of military dogs in small-scale counterterrorism operations. Its value cannot be simply measured by technical level and manufacturing cost. After hearing what Chen Chen said, Xiaoyu on the other side also laughed a little smugly, and then replied, didn't expect it? We expect that within 2 days, a group of military dogs will arrive. There are also matching dog trainers who have arrived at the same time, but there are only 2 of them, and they're not under your control. Of course, if you can recruit them into the team by your own ability, then it has nothing to do with us. I understand. Chen Chen answered immediately, and then asked, how many are there in total? 12. 12 military dogs? 1 for each person. These are stable. Chen Chen even thought that with the help of these 12 military dogs, it would not be difficult for the Dongfeng Corps to sweep across the entire Sulawesi. However, dogs alone are not enough. I also want protective gear, special bulletproof vest. If there is no ready-made one, ask Jiwa to make one. Also, do you know there's a titanium alloy crown? I want to customize a badge. I want to replace all my dogs with them. The news that he was about to get the military dog made Chen Chen happy, but his happy state did not last long. Unexpected but sudden news made him feel heavy again. Task Force 88 has reached Laboda and made first contact with the supporting police force from Kendari Station here. They seem to have reached some kind of consensus. In short, after the meeting, Task Force 88 began to deeply intervene in the investigation of the terrorist attack, while the police turned to behind-the-scenes, stability maintenance work. Chen Chen was prepared for this result. What he didn't expect was that the efficiency of Task Force 88 would be so high, far exceeding the average level of Indonesian police. In the office, Chen Chen, Shurdakai, and Zhang Yang sat together and discussed the latest situation. From the information I received, the Indonesian authorities have issued a directive for Kendari Police Chief Ga Yaozi to take over the investigation of the incident. But, as you can see, Task Force 88 is much tougher than Ga Yaozi. They can almost be said to have directly seized the authority and completely excluded the police from the front line. The police are still quite dissatisfied with this situation. I visited the police officers who were staying in our hospital, and I heard something from their words. They generally believe that they were at the forefront of the charge and even paid the price of heavy casualties. Now that the matter has been dealt with, Task Force 88 is out to take credit. Especially the chief of police from Labada, Argus, who even said to me in front of me that the contribution of Task Force 88 was not as great as that of EW Company. His meaning was very clear. I think if we want to find a breakthrough, it's a good idea to start with him. But the problem is that the rules for distributing benefits among Indonesian police forces are quite complicated. The higher up you go, the closer your relationship with Task Force 88 becomes. Agus alone cannot influence Ga Yaozi's decision, and Ga Yaozi cannot influence the decision of the higher-level superintendent of police, and the superintendent of police cannot influence the decision of the president. So, we may need a strong reason to convince Ga Yaozi. Isn't our achievements enough? Hearing this, Shurdakai asked in confusion. Of course it's not enough. For the police, this incident can only be a balance of merits and demerits. They acted very bravely, suppressed a riot that could have escalated, and killed the instigator. But the problem is that the damage that has been done is real, and there is no doubt that this will become a bargaining chip for political opponents to attack them. So, if we want to convince Ga Yaozi, we must make him see the greater good. And I haven't found the entry point for this benefit yet. After the words fell, Chen Chen nodded slightly. After all, Zhang Yang is not a professional intelligence officer, so being able to achieve this is actually quite good. So, he said, this kind of closed-source intelligence cannot be obtained through non-contact means, so don't worry too much. Now that things have developed to this point, I should also meet with the person I mentioned to you, Argus. Maybe we can get something out of him. A few minutes later, Chen Chen arrived at the clinic in Qingshan Park. Although it is a clinic, it is actually quite large with 2 ICUs alone and hundreds of wards. This thing is actually a deformed product of the compromise between Qingshan Group and local officials. It is part of the infrastructure for minerals transaction. Chief Argus of the Labada police station lived in the VIP ward on the 7th floor. Chen Chen met him very smoothly and started conversation with him very smoothly. He still remembered Chen Chen because when he fell to the ground, it was Chen Chen who led the team to disperse the crowd and pulled him up from the ground. If Chen Chen had not been fast enough, his injuries would obviously not be as simple as multiple fractures. Therefore, he was quite enthusiastic towards Chen Chen, and the opening of the two people was not awkward at all. After a while of greetings, Chen Chen roughly understood Agus's temper and said to him directly, "We want to obtain the law enforcement power granted by the police to more effectively combat the JD forces in Sulawesi. We need Ga Yaozi's permission, and of course, your assistance. Mr. Argus, I believe you understand what I mean, so I would like to hear your advice." Hearing Chen Chen's words, Argus's originally smiling face instantly changed into a serious expression. He waved his hand, signaling the other attendants to leave. After the door of the ward was closed, he spoke to Chen Chen. "It's risky, but we're all smart people, so we might as well be direct." Argus's English is not very good, so his entire expression is extremely concise, revealing a sense of efficiency, advertisement, and, judging from his attitude when facing the riots, his ability is indeed not weak. The fact that such a person lives in a small place like Reboda shows how corrupt the Indonesian police system has become. Of course, it is precisely people like this who need the adventure opportunities provided by Chen Chen. So Chen Chen said, "I understand. What do you need us to do?" "You need to make a contribution." "We need to make a contribution." Argus continued. "Rahman is a bad guy, but just killing him is not enough. I think he is from JIS. But the biggest problem in Sulawesi is not JIS but EM. I know a place that is the base of EM. I hope you can go and look for it." Argus used the word find. Chen Chen was stunned for a moment and asked, "Maybe you meant investigate?" "No, you need to find something." "What did you find?" Chen Chen realized that the situation was somewhat different from what he had expected, so he stopped asking questions and waited for Argus's answer. A month ago, someone imported a large amount of makeup remover and nail polish remover into Sulawesi. I don't know why Sulawesi needs so much nail polish remover, but it's weird, right? This is a mining island, and we have lots of nitric acid, sulfuric acid, and hydrochloric acid. Do you know what the main ingredient of nail polish remover is? Chen Chen was startled, then nodded and said, "I know. How many are there?" Argus sighed and replied, "We don't know how many. The declaration says 50 kilograms, but perhaps the total amount will be more than 1 ton. Maybe even a few tons. And now, all the nail polish removers are lost and can't be found. You have to find it. If you find it, both Ga Yaozi and I will cooperate with you." "I understand. Give me a week." "No, you only have 3 days at most. JS will be nervous if it loses Rahman. They will start to act. You have to be faster than them." "Clear." Chen Chen nodded decisively. An ominous feeling arose in his heart. Tons of nail polish remover. What does that mean? Tons of acetone. If we count the ingredients in these nail polish removers, they are enough to produce tons of TAPT. This thing is a must-have explosive for IS members at home and when traveling. It also has another name, called Mother of Satan. If they really build it, not to mention the Qingshan Industrial Park, even Makassar will probably be severely damaged. Yes, time is indeed tight. Ramon's death has lit the fuse, and the long-accumulated barrel of explosives in Sulawesi is about to explode. After communicating with Argus, Chen Chen obtained the preliminary authorization from the local police. Of course, this authorization does not represent the official, but represents Argus personally. The criteria for implementing the authorization are to find the missing nail polish remover and figure out EM's specific plans in Sulawesi. This is no easy task for the Dongfang Corps because while they're good at fighting, they're really not good at investigating crimes. Moreover, it is too late to transfer Jiang He here temporarily. Although he is good at intelligence work, he cannot cook without the rice. What's more, he also had to run the communication service and had no time to take care of Indonesia's affairs. In the office, Chen Chen looked at the available information on the whiteboard and couldn't help but fall into deep thought for a moment. But so the intelligence we have now is actually quite limited. The nail polish remover was imported from Kendari and cleared at Port Ferry. The customs clearance was done by a completely formal customs clearance company, and the importer was also a completely formal trading company. The police had previously investigated the warehouse of this company called Taco Foreign Trade, but did not find any clues. According to Taco Foreign Trade, they only imported a batch of nail polish remover at the request of a customer, and they were not clear about the specific use and sales channels. And their client is a supermarket in Kendari called Indo Wholesale Supermarket. The supermarket said that they also purchased the goods according to the requirements of a major customer, and this major customer did take most of the goods for repackaging and sale, but it is said that the sales were not good, and most of them were eventually returned to Indo Wholesale Supermarket. The goods were stored in the warehouse of Indo Supermarket for less than 2 weeks before they were all lost. To be precise, it was stolen. But till now, the Kendari police have not caught anyone, and the investigation has made little progress. Everyone in this chain is very innocent and clean. The big customer in charge of terminal sales is even a devout Christian. There is absolutely no reason for him to associate with EM. Similarly, the suspicion of Indo Supermarket has been ruled out because if it was them, they could have disposed of the goods more covertly in the form of small-scale distribution, without any need for any excuse of theft. So overall, this is the situation. The biggest suspect, the major customer who was the source of this import business, had no motive at all. The Indo Supermarket, which was the most convenient place for the crime, did not have the right means to commit the crime. The Trade and Customs Clearance Company was a third party with good intentions, and Taco Foreign Trade did not even care about this batch of goods, because the volume of this batch of nail polish remover was indeed not large for their trade throughput. Forget about us. Even if the Indonesian police wanted to investigate, they would have no idea where to start. No wonder Argus said this was an important bargaining chip, because this was indeed a long-planned action. How should we raise it? What do you think? Where do you think the problem is most likely to lie? After hearing Chen Chen's words, everyone in the office fell silent. After thinking for a long time, Bao Chitsai was the first to raise his hand and asked tentatively, "Can you check the supermarket surveillance? Kendari is a big city. There should be surveillance in the supermarket, right?" That's the problem. Argus said the surveillance had been checked and found nothing wrong. It was as if the goods had disappeared into thin air. During an inventory check, the supermarket suddenly discovered that all the cartons of returned goods were empty. But they inspected the returned goods, and no problems were found at that time. As he finished speaking, Bao Chi frowned. This sounds unreasonable. First of all, how can Indo allow returns under such circumstances? Secondly, if they disappear after the return inspection is completed, doesn't the suspicion lie with the supermarket? The supermarket signed a disguised gambling agreement with its major customers, and the return of goods is still within the normal range. Chen Chen explained, and then said, "But I also think there are problems with the return inspection process. Maybe at that time, the goods have actually disappeared. After all, it's difficult to bribe the entire supermarket, but it's easy to bribe the few people in charge of acceptance. But there's really no way to check this because there's no surveillance and no evidence. In fact, this is what Argus really wants us to do. He wants us to arrest the employees responsible for the acceptance, and then use our own methods to force them to reveal their plans. In short, it means we have to do the dirty work. They have already provided the list. But I always feel that this is too risky. If they really catch ordinary people, that would be bullshit. We would have to bear the blame for torture and kidnapping, and they wouldn't have to bear any risks. If things get out of hand, they could just throw us out to take the blame." Having said that, Chen Chen couldn't help but sigh. As expected, it is one of the most corrupt police systems in the world. Even the relatively upright Argus is very familiar with this set of conspiracies and intrigues related to power politics. You can't even say how bad he is, because he's really just paving the way for himself. However, this retreat was at the expense of the Dongfang Corps. Looking at Chen Chen's expression, Shi Dakai asked, "Wearing a mask? The features are too obvious, unless we don't carry guns or equipment. But then our safety cannot be guaranteed. My idea is that if there are other ways to find clues, we should try not to put ourselves in danger. But we really have no other choice." Li Bang took the opportunity to interject, and Chen Chen nodded slowly, eventually shelving his somewhat unrealistic conservative plan. Yes, there is indeed no other way, because if there is any other way, not only the police, but also the 88th Task Force should take action. I can only go and take a look first, at least to get a feel for the situation over there, and then decide on the next plan. Kendari is not far from La Boda, and the road condition of the ring road is also good. It will take about 2 hours at most to get there. Even if the basic security force of Qingshan Park is retained, Chen Chen can at least send out a team to investigate. So, he made a prompt decision and said, "Then let's go over and take a look. No matter what the situation is over there, at least find a target first and do some human intelligence." As for whether we should follow their ideas or find another way, we should just adapt to the situation. After the plan was drawn up, Chen Chen immediately began to prepare. That afternoon, he determined the personnel who would go to Kandari, still in the most familiar formation, consisting of Shirdukai, Lin He, and himself. The reason why Bao Chi was not chosen is that Bao Chi has the best English in the Indonesian team. If he stays in the Qingshan Park, he can temporarily hold the field in case of some special circumstances and when the translator is not available. Logically speaking, as a person with a medical degree, Ping Chuan's English should not be too bad, but the problem is that he basically only knows academic English for reading and writing, and his spoken English is not even as good as Shirdukai, who has only studied for less than a year. So when quick communication is needed, he is of little use. Advertisement thus. The personnel arrangement was finalized, and then the 4 members of the reconnaissance team began to select equipment. Pistols and machete rifles are must-haves. Although the registered gun type of the Dongfeng Corps is actually only the FN-57 that was lost before, and even assault rifles are not included, the gun management in Indonesia is completely abstract. As long as you have a gun license, you will most likely not be troubled, because those who can get a gun license are generally either rich or noble or have connections. Unless something major happens, no one would be so blind as to cause trouble. In addition to the curved gun, Chen Chen decided to bring the 416 Hong Kong dollars as well. Although it is not convenient to carry with you, it can be placed in the car as support firepower. In case of any emergency situation that requires a gunfight, you don't have to shoot at others with a pistol. However, apart from rifles and pistols, the Dongfeng Corps is not allowed to bring any light or heavy machine guns currently in its possession. Kandari is a large city after all. If you take out a machine gun in a place like that, don't even think about investigating JD elements. You yourself are the biggest JD element. As for stun grenades and smoke bombs, Chen Chen would take them with him, but he did not plan to use them unless it was the most urgent moment. Just like Xiaoyu said, the Indonesian police are very sensitive to explosives. Once any signs of explosives are found, they will definitely conduct a thorough investigation of the incident. This is also why the police paid attention to the clues of this batch of nail polish remover because they were really scared. Therefore, in such an environment, Chen Chen decided not to use throwing objects if possible. Especially in urban areas, if it is not absolutely necessary, it is better not to take out stun grenades and smoke bombs. Looking at the equipment being selected one by one, Li Bang beside Chen Chen couldn't help but sigh. I don't know when was the last time I fought such a poor battle. There are no heavy machine guns, no automatic grenades, no grenades or smoke bombs. I only had a pistol and a rifle. I had so little stuff that I felt like I was running naked. Hearing his words, Chen Chen couldn't help but roll his eyes. Don't forget, when we fought our first battle in Pubay, we didn't even have a pistol. Back then, pistols were so expensive for us. Look at it now, there's so many pistols. What else are you dissatisfied with? Captain, we didn't have pistols at that time, but we had SVDs, grenades, and gas tank cannons. Chen Chen glared at Li Bang and continued. We are not going to seize the point. To put it bluntly, the highest intensity conflict may be just a CQB attack on a building. You still want a gas tank cannon? Why not just give you the TATP of those JD molecules? Forget it. I'd rather use ANFO than TATP. Li Bang waved his hands quickly and said with lingering fear. Bao Chi did it once in Munka, and it was horrible. The materials are safe when stored separately, but once they crystallize, they will explode with the slightest friction. This thing is just like a firecracker. There is no way to transport it. If it was really manufactured and then transported, there might be a manhole cover on the road, and the whole car would be blown away. Really? Chen Chen nodded with some amusement, but suddenly, his brows frowned again. Li Bang's words gave him an important reminder, that his TTP is very unstable, and it is indeed impossible to transport it over long distances. No, not only can it not be transported over long distances, but given the general road and traffic conditions in Indonesia, even short-distance transportation is very difficult. Therefore, the EIM extremists here must be like all other JD elements. They will never start the manufacturing process before actually taking action. They should have determined the attack target and scouted the attack route, and then used the limited equipment at hand to quickly complete the manufacturing, deployment, and detonation. However, the quantity of nail polish remover or acetone is too large for them to manufacture in home workshops. Yes, this thing can indeed be made with a pressure cooker, a gas stove, a water bath, and a refrigerator, but the manufacturing speed using this process is very slow. How many people do you need to work at the same time to complete the manufacturing within a short period of time after the goal is determined? Dozens? Hundreds? No, the total amount of nail polish remover exceeds 1 ton. And it may take hundreds of people to operate at the same time to use it all. And these hundreds of people must have certain chemical knowledge and be able to conduct chemical experiments independently. Otherwise, what EIM carried out was not a suicide attack, but pure suicide. But how is this possible? If he really had so many high-end talents, would he still need to hide in the dark? The answer is very clear. That is, EIM must have one or several large-scale manufacturing bases. This manufacturing base is highly similar to a type of unregulated indigenous workshop facility that is common in Indonesia, namely, an indigenous oil refinery. This kind of thing is everywhere in Sulawesi. Cheap homemade Caudal machines are scattered all over the suburbs of Kandari, and even in the city of Kandari, there are still many homemade diesel processing workshops. This kind of place is really suitable for making bombs. Chen Chen stood up suddenly, and then immediately led the team to the Qingshan Park clinic. He met Argus again, and asked him a question. Which homemade diesel processing workshop is there in Kandari, and is also near a cold storage? Or, is there any diesel processing workshop that has purchased a large freezer recently? 2 hours later, Chen Chen got the information he wanted. There are a total of 9 locations that meet his requirements. In theory, the target is not clear. However, one of them is near the Indo Wholesale Supermarket, which has a constant temperature cold storage. Without a doubt, this is the answer. The series of intelligence the police had seen before was just a fog. No matter what means those people used, they made the situation so confusing. But one thing is almost certain. That is, right now, that batch of nail polish remover is most likely in the supermarket's cold storage.